All right, man. So thanks for reaching out to me. I appreciate you willing to do this, man. It seems like you've got a pretty interesting story. So tell me a little bit about your background here.
So I grew up in New Jersey, right across from Staten Island, so not too far from where you are. Went to school at NJIT up in Newark and got a degree in construction management. The first job out of school was a small residential remodeling contractor. We did kitchens, bathrooms, small additions, that kind of stuff. So I kind of saw the way small companies operate. Then about 2 years later, I moved out to Las Vegas. I spent 5 years out there doing custom homes and some small uh, commercial strip centers and stuff like that. So kind of got into the commercial thing. And when I moved back to New Jersey in '99, I went to work for Turner Construction. So I was running very large jobs. The smallest
Yeah.
project I was on up there was just $6-7 million. Some of them were 30-40 million dollars. And then I moved into the pre-construction side of the business from project management and started doing estimating. So I started really getting an understanding of how bigger companies priced work.
Mm.
And at the same time, I still had all my contacts from the smaller residential side of things and kept in touch with a lot of those folks. And there was a forum back, before Facebook. Everybody was on the little forums and they'd go on there and post questions and chat back and forth and all. And it was for the Journal of Light Construction, which was a magazine that was kind of geared toward residential remodelers. And they had an estimating forum. And the guy who was the moderator of that forum, I think he was in it just to kind of try to sell his system that he had, which was all about everything being based on, like using a bare labor rate and then putting all your money into this huge markup. Like they would have bare labor, bare materials, and then put a 60% markup
Hmm.
on to cover things, which was great if if everything worked out. You had all the labor, during the course of the year that you thought you were going to have. You had the right number of billable hours. You had all the right subcontractors pricing, and it all the math worked out to cover your overhead. But these smaller guys that were like 1 and 2 man, trim carpenters or roofers or siding guys, that wasn't the program that they should have been using, and
You're right.
and then the guy stopped. He kind of stopped showing up too. I mean, there would be weeks where he wouldn't show up as the moderator for this thing, and I found myself answering more and more questions for people, and ended up emailing the folks at JLC and offering to be the moderator for their forum. So I did that for probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years while I was still working commercial construction, and have always been involved. Like I said, we try to help the smaller contractors, be successful. I spoke at some of the JLC conventions that they'd have. Uh, Talked to a couple of different groups like the ABC, the Associated Builders and Contractors of Georgia. I do a pre-construction seminar for them every year. Um, a bunch of different stuff that just try to help people get their numbers right, because
Mm.
I see what happens when the numbers aren't right and somebody gets in trouble on a job and a job goes south. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for everybody thinks, oh, it's terrible for the subcontractor. Well, it's not great for the general contractor either when somebody
Yeah.
falls down and I got to drag somebody in to finish. Like you've talked a couple of times about that project where you had all those handrails that you had to move the mid rail down. That was probably good for you,
That was
at
great
the end
for
of the
us.
day. Was definitely not good for the client, was not good for the contractor who had the mid rails in the wrong spot. But that was more of a probably a miscommunication or mismeasurement issue. But from a cost perspective, I said having the wrong numbers just it doesn't work well for anyone.
Hmm.
So I say over the past 20 or so years, I've stayed involved in the pre-construction side on the big commercial stuff. Moved down to Georgia in 2007. Worked with Skanska, which is a big, large general contractor. You've probably seen them up there in Pennsylvania. And again, working on projects that ranged from, 20 million to over $500 million. But I always had that, like I said, that relationship with the smaller contractors. And at the same time, I've also always had my own, I don't even want to call it a side hustle because that always sounds kind of like, you know,
Janky.
yeah, I'm janky. I'm working for $20 an hour because I can tell you that the one thing I will never do is even if I if it is on the side and I don't have all the big expenses and all, I'm not putting effort in for for what some of these guys do.
Oh man,
As
I
far as
know.
an hourly rate, and obviously it hurts everybody. And I don't want to be the guy that you're sitting there going, oh man, guys out there working for $30 an hour. How can I compete with him?
You
First off, I
don't.
don't want to work with $30 an hour, and I don't want to do that to you. You know.
Yep.
So I guess about 6 years ago, my older daughter was in high school. She wanted to start doing something to make some money, but didn't really want to work fast food or all the things that kids do when they're in high school. So I saw that as an excuse to go and buy a CNC plasma table, and
It's
because
a great
why not?
excuse.
Yeah. And so we started a company, we built the LLC in her name. Her name's Maddie, and we wanted to just make signs and go sell them at the farmers market, that kind of stuff. So what do you want to call it? She said, I don't know. How about Maddie's Signs? I said, how about we mix it up a little bit, call it Mad Designs? Same letters, just mix it up. So we formed an LLC, started going to farmers markets, selling little branded stuff for the towns that we lived in, and some of the subdivisions nearby, stuff for people to hang on their wall, but then always taking custom orders too. And over time, it kind of morphed into larger commercial signs, for people's lobbies, front entrance signs for subdivisions, that kind of stuff. And then into some different fabrications. I had a friend of mine that had a clothing store that he was opening that needed a bunch of displays, and he wanted like a metal and wood look to things. So there's about $30,000 worth of displays for him. And it was at that point where I really started kind of refining the system as to how to price the stuff.
Hmm.
And at the same time, started getting more involved in the welding pages on Facebook and Instagram and all. And I started seeing the same stuff that I saw with the residential remodelers. With everybody's just getting this really bad information, and I think that maybe some of the people mean well, and they just maybe forget what it was like when they started out and didn't know everything.
Hmm.
But I mean, some of the stuff that I see is just like, my God, like the one thing that I've heard, I don't know where it came from, but everybody says, we'll take your materials cost and multiply it by 3, and that's your sales price.
I've
What does
I've seen that too.
right? I mean, what does that have to do with anything? I mean, I can go buy a 20-foot stick of tube for $50. I can cut it into 4 pieces and weld it into a frame and charge $150 for it. I probably did okay, because it probably took me less than an hour to do that. But I could take that same stick of tube and make a really elaborate, table base, or a display shelf or something. It might have 10 hours in it. Am I
Hmm.
still supposed to only charge $150? And I guess, well, yeah, it all evens out at the end. I don't think that's
No,
the.
no. Well, it does. It not only doesn't even out, it's you're shorting yourself and you're dragging the whole market down.
Oh yeah,
You,
yeah.
like I I've said it a bunch of times, a rising tide floats all boats.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're able to price things accordingly and we're all making the money that we should be, then everything just then it all evens out. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Then
yeah.
it works out for everybody. But to not know your cost and to not know,
Mm-hmm.
like you sent me the breakdown that you have when you go teach people this, and it's spot on. This is
Mm-hmm.
exactly how the big companies do it.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why they're big companies. It's because they follow this rule. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So yeah, I'm really excited to have you on because I see so much of what you're talking about on the Facebook's, welding small business page and a bunch of other places. And it's just I'm like, guys, stop.
Yeah.
Like, what kills me, I mean, maybe it works for some people, but pricing handrails per linear foot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you can't, like, you can get a ballpark for linear feet, but what if it all bolts together and doesn't weld together? What if they have a wooden top rail? What if you have to, core drill and rebar filled concrete versus just putting tapcons in? Like, how about they have custom mounts for it? Like, you can't just do that. You have to price each individual job. What if you have special returns at the ends instead of just cutting it off straight and sanding up the ends?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so much, I hate to say wrong information, but it's just not good. It's just
Yeah.
bad information out there.
Yeah. I mean, what? Using your handrail example, is it the same per foot if I've got 2 feet of handrail as it is if I've got 2,000 feet of handrail? I
Right.
mean, I'm assuming I could probably get a little better production and out of my 2,000 feet than I can on the 2,000 feet or on the
Mm-hmm.
2 feet. So, like you said, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I've got a project right now that we're doing that's it's a 41-story office building that they're converting into apartments, because the Atlanta office building market is really down, and everybody wants to see more residential stuff downtown. So they're trying to make this work. And one of the problems is that the building was built in 1966, I think, and none of the railings meet code in the stair rails, so in the stairwells. So how, what do you think it costs to go in and retrofit railings like that in a 41-story building that doesn't have an elevator large enough to get stair railings up? So I mean, you're going to be rigging them, fishing them up through a 41-story stairwell with chain fall, and going in there and doing all this welding and stuff in place. So, I mean, does that handrail cost per square foot come even remotely close to covering what what you're going to have to do on that job? No.
Yep.
I mean, the good thing is, if somebody was stupid enough to price it that way, we would probably see rather quickly, when we had 4 guys who told us that the handrails were going to be, $2.5 million, and somebody said it was $1 million, we'd be like, I think I think something's wrong. I
don't think you understand
there,
the scope of what's going on.
Yeah, and it's the thing. And there's some GCs out there who'll take advantage of it and say, well, he knew what he had to do. He said it was $1 million, but then we're back to what we were talking about a minute ago. Halfway through, he falls down, and we're all in trouble because we're behind schedule. Somebody else got to come in. It's not a good situation. So yeah, but like I said, that one drives me nuts. The other one that I see a lot is, but it's usually there's a lot of guys on the handrail pages and the small business owner pages that are just getting out of school, and they'll post a picture of their F-150 or the 1500 series Chevy with a generator in the back and a small inverter welder, and say, hey, I just got out of school, I just went through welding school, I'm trying to get out and do some stuff on my own, and what do you guys suggest I do? And immediately people are, well, you can't be taken seriously as a welder with a setup like that. Like, nobody's going to take you seriously. Well, yeah, if you rolled up on a skyscraper job with that setup, or a pipeline job, yeah, somebody's probably not going to take you seriously. But show up at Mrs. Jones' house to fix her gate on her pool gate that's that needs a new latch, or that the dog broke a piece off of. She doesn't know what she's looking at anyway. So I mean, who cares? You can put a good bead down and it holds, and you're neat, you're clean, and you're professional. Doesn't matter. You don't need a SA200 on the back of the rigged out dually.
Yep.
So, but I just see that all the time. Or you see people talking about pricing. What's a rate per hour? And they'll do things like, they won't tell you where they're from, and then people just start throwing all these rates out with and not telling you where they are. Well, obviously the rate where you are in semi-rural Pennsylvania is very different than what's down here. It's different than what's out, if you're out in LA or in Texas or wherever. So the numbers don't have any bearing on anything.
Yep.
And then you get the guys throwing out I'm not starting a truck for less than $150 an hour at a 4-hour minimum. It's like, really? Well, that's good that you are so busy that you can't do a job that's less than $600.
Yep.
That's great. If you're that busy and you can do that, that's fine. But you know what? I'll stop on the way home and pick that job up for $300 in an hour.
Cash money, on the way home.
yeah. I mean, if it's 3 hours away, obviously I'm going to do it. But if it's on the way, or I can make it. If I got a guy who's got a couple hours left at the end of the day, send them out and get it done.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So it's just frustrating to see all that kind of stuff, and I think it leaves a lot of these guys with no real understanding of how to fundamentally price work to make sure that 6-8 months down the road they're not sitting there going, oh man, I thought I was making more money because I was making $20 an hour at my job. I quit that place, man, I'm charging $30. I should be rolling in it. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. But nobody's ever taught them. Nobody's told them. They get a lot of these guys. They get pissed off. They leave. They decide to charge more than the boss who was making all the money. Because I'm sure you probably had guys leave over the years that do that. Yeah, Kevin's making all this money, and I'm making $30 an hour or whatever. He's charging. It usually happens when they see your bills. Like they happen to see they see an invoice. And you say, hey, go. You drop this off to the customer at the end of the job. And they look at the thing and they're like, whoa, he's charging me out at $120 an hour. I'm not making that kind of money.
Yeah. Like we have, so I'll tell everybody what we charge, but I hate like I don't. I'm kind of protective over the invoices
Hmm.
because it's dangerous for my guys to see what I charge without understanding the bills.
Hmm.
And you see top line, this is what the invoice is for, but you don't see the $35,000 a year we pay insurance.
Sure.
You don't see any of the tens of thousands of dollars we have to pay per month just to keep the doors open.
The workers'
So
comp. Yeah.
yeah, like, oh my gosh, like the insure, like we have like talking to my wife, we have like six different kinds of insurance. I'm like,
Hmm.
this is ridiculous, you know?
Yep.
But it's it's real easy for people to get caught up and see, that like the big numbers without fully understanding the real cost of
Hmm.
what goes in to properly running a business. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Depreciation, like how, like, yeah, okay, you bought an engine drive for $4,000, but you're gonna have to replace that in 2,000 hours.
Hmm.
So like bare minimum before you do anything, it's costing you $2 an hour just to run the thing. And people don't
Hmm.
understand that you have to budget away for that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I say, you saw what I said. Yeah. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. It's really meant for that one person,
mhm.
that's just starting out and doesn't have, like I said, they don't have the shop, they don't have, workers' comp to cover out all of their guys and that kind of stuff. It's just kind of, just the fundamentals for the guy who truly says, look, I want to go out and make it on my own and get started. And it probably works, if you've got one person or you've got a small shop or something, but it's just, obviously you'd have to add those costs into this, to
Yep.
this program.
Well,
But
for everybody who can't see that, how about you just walk through
yeah,
each of these line items,
yep,
and we'll just kind of, for everybody who can't see it, you'll hear it. So
yeah. All right. So, the first thing is, like, we've been talking about is, figuring out what that hourly rate is. And the key to that whole thing is understanding that your rate is not the same as my rate, is not the same as Joe's rate, is not, it doesn't matter what everybody else is charging. Now we'll get back to that later because you do want to know what everybody else is charging
mm-hmm,
to make sure you're not undercutting them when you don't necessarily have to.
mm-hmm,
Okay. But it doesn't matter what their costs are because, like you said, you've got $35,000 in insurance a year. I might have, $3,000 worth of insurance a year. So I've got a far smaller, insurance nut to spread over the number of billable hours that we have. So, it really kind of starts out with trying to figure out, you know, you're going to charge a certain amount, you're going to have all those bills, and then you're going to end up with what's left over, which is, partly your salary, partly your profit. So you got to start with figuring out what it is that you need to make per hour, per year, per month, per week, however you want to figure it out.
mm-hmm.
So people say, well, look, my bills are, $10,000 a month. I got to cut, bring home at least $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever the number is. Or sometimes they'll say, well, I was making, $25 an hour before, so I've got to make at least that much. It'd be foolish to, go into business for myself and make less. Although I think some guys probably end up making less at the end of the day. But figure out what that number is. Are you replacing full-time work? Again, what were you making there? What kind of benefits did you have? A lot of guys get lucky and have a wife who's got a job with the full benefits package, and they don't have to worry about that. Uh, if you did have it, though, one of the big things to remember is that you'll see, well, it was costing me $300 every other week out of my paycheck for my insurance or my health insurance for me and my family. Well, that's not what it's going to cost you when you go out on your own. I've recently changed jobs about 3 months ago, and our biweekly deductions for health insurance for my wife and my kids, myself, was about $400 every 2 weeks. So call it $800 a month. Well, when you leave your job, they send you this COBRA paperwork, which, for people that don't know what that means, it's Continuation of Benefits Something Act, which basically requires your employer to offer you the same insurance for up to 18 months, but you pay the full cost of it. So, I was paying $800 a month for my coverage, but that letter came and it shows that the company was paying $2,200 toward that insurance policy. So that's a $3,000 a month cost. It's not an $800 a month cost. So you've got that, that base number. Let's say you were making $25 an hour, so call that $50,000 a year, right? So now we've got $50,000 a year there. We've got $36,000 in insurance if you're going to cover that, if you're going to use that Cobra plan. And if you've got any kind of, medical conditions, you better have something, something solid.
Mm.
So we're at, we started at 50, we're already up to $86,000, right? You've got the taxes side of things that, the other side of Social Security and FICA and, Medicare and all that, which I think is what, 6.8% or something. Let's just call it, for round numbers, let's call it 10%. Yeah. And so you got that on your 50 grand. So that's another $5,000. So now we're at, like $91,000. So you've got to make $91,000 to end up where you were, So it's it's a lot more. I mean, it's almost double what what that base number was, right? So so that kind of sets the cost of you, as the owner, as far as what you need to make, again, before profit. Then you've got the other costs of running a business that occur whether you're doing any work or not, right? Because the insurance and business licenses, business or vehicle costs, like the monthly, if you've got a work truck, the monthly cost of that truck, the insurance on the truck, the maintenance on the truck, that stuff's going to be there regardless of whether you work 2 hours a month or 200 hours a month. So you've got to factor all that in. You mentioned the shop earlier. If you've got a shop, you've got the shop, the shop rent, the shop insurance, the shop utilities. If there's a common area maintenance charge that you're paying because you're in some kind of a, an industrial park or something. So you've got, all of that. And then anything else that, that comes along, you've got, equipment that you bought that, that you have a loan on. Obviously you've got to cover that. Or if you're planning on buying equipment and, taking some financing out on that, you've got to cover that. So there's another whole nut of, that needs to be covered. So for argument's sake, for discussion's sake today, let's just say that between that $90,000 that we talked about for, for your labor and the other costs, let's just round it up and call it $150,000 total that you have to make to cover that, those costs. So now you got $150,000, and somebody would say, well, I work 40 hours a week, and I got 50 hours or 50 weeks in the year. So that's 2,000, billable hours. So take that 150 divided by 2,000 hours, and I've only got to charge $75 an hour, and I've got everything covered. Until you realize that more than likely you're not going to bill 2,000 hours. Now you could bill 2,000 hours, but you're going to be really busy 7 days a week trying to get that in. As you know, I know you've talked a little bit. You guys are like a 410 program, right?
Yep, we do 4 10-hour days, and I always say plan on working Fridays. We do our best to not, but if you need off on a Friday, you got to request it, especially in the summertime. So,
but now out of those, so out of that 40 hours for one of your guys, how many actual billable hours would you say you can pull for one of them?
It depends on the job. All the inefficiency, we aim for like slightly larger jobs. That way I can build in some of the machine setup time. That way, if you're doing a railing that's 4 feet long and you have to break out your table saw, you have to go get material, you have to bring it all in, you have to move it around, that's an hour right there. An hour on $1,000 piece, a job, or an hour on a $10,000 job, you can build in that time on the bigger job. So, I push to try to get 10 billable hours out of my guys as much as now me, no way. Like, honestly, a lot. Like, even Dylan, my foreman, he spends, depending on the week, he spends half his time working with other people
Hmm.
solving their problems.
Yeah.
So yes, they might get 38, 35, they're 40 billable hours, but I've also got Dylan's 15 to 20 hours
Hmm.
helping them be successful across, 4 or 5 guys. So, you have to divide that 20 hours, divide it by 5 guys. That's take 4 hours off of each guy
Right.
for, actual time that it took. So it kind of depends, it depends what we're doing. It depends how much we have to switch up jobs. We've taken a lot more of the accessory work in-house, like sandblasting and painting and things like that. The design work, we're not real efficient at that. We have to set up
Hmm.
every time we do it. It's still cheaper than having to send it out to be sandblasted and load it up on the truck, take it, nobody in my shop really likes to do the painting of the powder coating, or
Hmm.
sorry, the painting of the blasting. Everybody is like, why do we do this? Why do we do this? I'm like, okay, you wanna know why we do this? Take that railing, that small railing, 10 feet long, maybe two, three of them, doesn't matter. Take it, put it on a pallet, band the pallet, strap it to the truck, drive it to the powder coater and come back.
Hmm.
Your minimum 2 hours right there. And then you've got to go to the powder coater again, pick it up and bring it back and unload it from the truck because we're probably not going to stall it for another week. So you're at least 2 hours right there. Usually it works out to be like 2.5 hours.
Hmm.
It's, the inefficiencies of walking around, getting straps and things like that. So I'm at 5 billable hours before we even pay for powder coating.
Right.
Depending where we go, we are, you know, some places have a $400 minimum for the powder coating. No matter what they do, it's $400. Four
Hmm.
hundred bucks covers you up to the, X amount of linear feet. Um, so you're $900 for powder coating just about anything we do.
Hmm.
Versus, all right, yes, we can blast it. That's an hour right there. It takes time to set the sprayer up, and it takes time to put it in the paint booth and get it all ready to go and paint it. But depending on what you're doing, maybe 3 hours right there. And so for a smaller job, we don't price ourselves out of the market for that. You know what I
Right.
mean? And we don't have to worry about the lead time on the painting or the powder coating. And the one place that we used to take the powder coating, they used to outsource the sandblasting. So you're 2 layers deep into other people's schedules
Hmm.
versus you finish it up in the shop. It's nice the next day. We go out there, we blast it. We paint it in the afternoon. We put a second coat on the next morning, and it's done in 2 days. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, as far as efficiency goes, but you know what? Like a lot of people, they don't look at okay, it's 2 hours to go to the powder coater, and you have to do that twice. You know, then you have to add powder coating on top of it. Well, but people are like, oh, 200, at the Facebook groups, they're like, oh, $200 for powder coating. All right, that's cool. If
Hmm.
he's like around the corner and you can put it on a cart and roll it to him.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you're putting it, like, you're not considering you have to put it on the truck, you have to strap it down, you have to bring it there. You're gonna BS with the guy for 5 minutes. Then you gotta wait for him to get the forklift and unload it. And like, it's all that inefficiency that a lot of people don't see, but truly is costing you money, or at least you need to bill for it.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny you mentioned the right around the corner because I don't do a lot of powder coating, but there's a company that's like halfway between my office and my house that's literally 2 miles off the road, and they do all the powder coating for Easy Go golf carts.
Okay.
So like Easy Go literally brings a tractor trailer full of golf cart frames to them and bumpers and everything else like every other day. They have these specialized racks that they hang all the pieces on the trailer, and the guy just picks the whole pallet off, drops it on the ground. They send all the stuff through the line, they put it back on the rack, and they stick it back on the trailer. So as long as I want it Vulcan black, I can have this stuff powder coated. Like it's like $50 because they just take my stuff and hang it, on the rack in
Yeah.
between two golf cart frames, and I pick it up 2 days later. So it was working out nice. And then I started thinking, it would be nice to be able to do other colors and stuff, because, like you say, anything other than black, it's like a $350 setup charge because they got to change the line over and everything. So I went out about 2 months ago and bought a powder coating oven that was on Facebook Marketplace. And I got it home, I got it all set up, and I was in there blowing powder on some pieces and putting them in the oven and everything. And then I realized the mess that shit makes if you're not like set up with a dedicated booth and everything. So I was like, you know what? I'm going back to just everything being Vulcan black. I sold the powder coating oven this weekend. It lasted a total of about 6 weeks at my house.
Yep.
So yeah, but like I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you got to factor into, the concept of a billable hour. And I mean, the number that I've always seen, and it seems to work out for some of the smaller guys, the one man shop type of stuff, is you're more than likely going to get, you'd be lucky to get 30 billable hours out of a semi-normal week, unless you want to work 10 hours a day in the shop plus 5 hours at home, at night, doing the bills and making calls and doing estimates and everything. And even if you're doing, not that you're not going to have some level of that, but even doing that, you're still going to have some non-productive time at the shop. I mean, somebody's going to pop their head in the door and you'll want to talk to you about something for half an hour, and take that time out of your day, or you're going to have to go run and measure a job during the course of the day. So the thought is, figure on roughly 1,500 billable hours a year instead of 2,000 hours. So for that one person operation. So going back to that $150,000, a year, conveniently, it divided by 1,500 works out to about $100 an hour. And again, I'm not saying that any of these numbers that we're discussing on this, on this Zoom call have anything to do with your reality. I'm just trying to put something to have some numbers so that as we're talking, everybody can kind of hear something and know what know how to work it with their own numbers. So again, take all that cost, divide it by what you think a reasonable number of billable hours is, and that's your hourly rate. So for the rest of this, these examples, we'll just kind of use that $100 an hour as a number. It's probably not that far off. So the next piece, once you know what you need to make or charge per hour in the way of a billable rate, is figuring out what the costs of the actual job are. I mean, because a lot of people hate the estimating side of it. They either don't have a good system in place, or they're just not comfortable with numbers, or what. But I mean, I've been doing it for 30 years now, so I've become more than comfortable with it, and kind of just whether I'm looking at something like what we're talking about, or a larger project, the process is the same. And and a lot of the projects we get on, they've got some kind of a unique something that I can't just go back to historical information for and pull. Like if you ask me how much the glass curtain wall system is on a building, the last 10 jobs we've done have been $85 to $100 a square foot. I can just put a number in there and figure that out. But we've got a lot of unique projects. That we did a wood frame or timber frame, like a mass timber project for they call it living building project. That was it was kind of like a really green, sustainable program. So it was all this big heavy timber, but with large steel connections and all these. They didn't want really deep wood trusses, so there were all these turnbuckles and queen posts and things. So it was a combination of wood and steel, and it really hadn't been done before. So how do you figure out the cost of that? Well, the same way we're going to talk about it. You look at it, you break it down into bits and pieces that are manageable. You figure out what your labor, your material costs are going to be. You figure about how much time you're going to need to do it, and you add that all together and come up with a cost. So the first part of putting the price together, once you figure out what it is you're trying to build, is figuring out what your material costs are. So you do a takeoff, like in rail. You're talking about railing this earlier. So we've got 100 feet of railing. We've got an inch and a half round. There's inch and a half square tube top rail. So I got 100 linear feet of that. I got a matching bottom rail. So I got another 100 linear feet. I've got a post every 10 feet. So I've got 11 posts at 5 feet, right? With by the time you cut them to size and embed them in the
Mhm.
concrete and all, I'm probably being a little overly conservative there. But you add up all of that, you get your picket material, figure out how many pickets you need, um, add up how much half by half tube you're going to need for the pickets. And then one of the things that I found is really important, especially if it's something kind of if it's something unusual, is don't just add that stuff up and say I've got 300 linear feet of this and 500 linear feet of that. You got to kind of translate that into the units that you're going to be buying this stuff in. So you've got if all you can get is 20-foot sticks. I mean, can you get 24s by you?
It depends what it is.
Okay. Yeah, for the most part around here, if you want it in any kind of reasonable time, you're just buying, or if you want to buy like a truckload of it, you're buying 20-foot sticks. You're not getting 24s.
Hmm.
So, uh, example, I had that clothing store I talked about earlier. I built them these display racks for suits and for dress shirts that were 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, about 2 feet deep. Well, there was a post in each corner, rails across top and bottom in the middle, and then down the side. Well, if you just added all the material up, it worked out to needing like 3 sticks, 3 20-foot sticks per shelving unit. But when you actually go and try to lay it out on on a 20-foot stick and start cutting all the 7-foot pieces, well, you take a 20-footer and you cut 7 and 7, you're left with with 6. Well, I can't get the third 7 out of that, right? So what we did was just kind of laid out and said, okay, I've got a 7 and a 7, and I'll take a 4 for one of the cross rails, and I'll take another 2 for one of the front and back pieces, and just lay it out. I was literally sitting there drawing little 20-foot sticks on a piece of paper.
Yep.
And we found a way to lose 1 stick per job, per shelving unit for what we originally thought we were going to need.
Nice.
So that's $50 a pop, for every one of these shelving units,
Yeah.
because of what a piece of 1.5 square tube was costing. So that little bit of effort, took an extra 10 minutes to draw it out, but saved us on the on 7 of those racks, saved us $350.
Hmm.
And that wasn't something that the customer saw. That was something that we were able to put in our pockets.
It's funny because I made that mistake twice. I've just and because you just like I don't know what I was thinking. I just added up the inches, multiplied it out because we were making like 500 something pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Took the inches, multiplied it out, divided, that's how many inches, divided by 12. That's how many feet, divided by 20 sticks. That's how many sticks I need. You round up like to the closest one and you add another one just because.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were short like 14 sticks or something like that. It's because I did my math wrong and you can't get that many pieces out of it. And we do these, stainless steel guards, not
Mm-hmm.
guards, they're like ground anchors. We get about 200 in order for 200 every like 3 months. And we have like 20-inch drops. We have a whole bundle of 20-inch drops
Mm-hmm.
because you just can't get the 30 and a half inches that you need out of that drop. It just won't happen. So we have a bundle of them sitting on top of our sea container that I have no idea what I'm gonna do with them one day. Honestly, they should probably just go to scrap. But it's one of those things you just can't multiply it out and then figure out like your linear footage. You have to actually draw it out so that, and especially when you get into multiple jobs that have multiple pieces, you can lose your shirt real quick, especially if you're only bidding it on at that point.
Yeah, there's a guy down here that does a bunch of CNC plasma stuff that he cuts round circle like end caps for a company that does large diameter like caissons. So then they have to put a cap over top of it. And so he takes a sheet and say he buys a 10-foot sheet, but it's a 3.5-foot or 4-foot circle or something, and he can get 3 of them out of a sheet. He's got a drop at the end, but then he's also got these 3 very large areas on this sheet that are unused. And the guys who do a lot of plasma cutting stuff will say, oh, you just put a bunch of little bottle openers in there and that kind of stuff. It's like the guy says, I don't want to screw around with that stuff. I want to cut big circles out of pieces of plate. And he's got a same thing every once in a while on either Facebook or on Craigslist. You'll see this stack of, like 200 of these drops and these sheets with 3 big holes in them, and he's selling them for like, like $20 a sheet. But if you don't have a need for it, because he obviously doesn't, if somebody does have a need for it, it's great because $20 is, $20. But he's already
Sure.
factored the cost of the whole sheet into his price, and he's just trying to help somebody out. But like I said, what do you do with that stuff? But if you just looked at it and said, okay, I've got a 4-foot circle that's so many square feet, and you didn't take the time to lay it out on the sheet,
Hmm.
you might end up, in trouble when you find out that, it's 2.5 of them fit on a sheet. That doesn't really work out very well when you want a one
Yep.
piece circle, So
It's funny because when I like bidding sheet stuff for me, it's I always bid in at least a 2 foot by 4 foot piece.
mhm,
So that no matter what you do, it's going to cost you that 2 foot by 4 foot or price. If it's even just base plates, I'll ballpark it. I'll take a 48 by 48, and then I always round it up till at least a half sheet. Sometimes if I can, I round it up to a whole sheet, really, because for the extra $100 or something like that, I'll have it sit in the rack and not be used. But
mhm,
trying to maybe some guys who only do signs or only do flat sheets, they can figure out per square foot, and they're okay with keeping the per square foot price. And I'm not that detail oriented, and if they are, awesome, good for them, because I can't do that. You're paying for a quarter sheet, a half sheet, or a full sheet, and most of
right,
the time I don't even bother with a quarter sheet, because that's only on common sizes that we keep in stock. Like we keep 1/8 inch, we keep 3/16, we keep 3/8 quarter, 3/8 and half-inch in stock. I'm charging you for a quarter of that sheet because we have in stock. If it's something weird that I have to bring in, I'll see if they'll sell it to me in a half sheet, but usually it's like 3/4 of the price of a full sheet for me to
mhm,
get a half sheet. At that point, you know, I'll probably just charge it for the whole sheet, just because, for the pain in the ass factor.
yeah. It's crazy. If you start spending a lot of time on these plasma cutting forums or Facebook pages, some of these guys get so scientific with this stuff. Like, because people get the same thing. Hey, how do I price this sign? Here's what it looks like. It's this big. What do you think this is worth? And they'll say, well, it's so much per square inch for the material, plus so much per linear inch for the cut, and so much per pierce point for every pierce I have to make. And I'm going like, well, dude, first off, you've got to, if you want to price it that way, you've got to fully draw this thing. Like you got to
Yeah.
draw it and get it into sheet cam to let sheet cam tell you how many linear feet or how many linear inches you have to cut and how many pierce points you have. So you just spent, potentially half an hour screwing around with somebody's design to get it into your software to be able to price it without even knowing if they're going to bite or not.
Yep.
So I took the kind of the opposite side of things, and I said, look, if it's 16 gauge or 14 gauge material, it's $35 a square foot if it's fairly simple. If it's more complex, which means it's going to take more time to cut and more time to clean up and everything else, it's $45 to $50. And if it's really, really elaborate, it might be $60. And
Hmm.
I just kind of use that to be able to say, look, Mr. Your sign is 21 inches square, so that rounds up to 4 square feet for me, times X number of dollars per square foot. Here, it's probably about $140. And he's going to bite or he's not. And
Yeah.
that took me all of about, a minute to figure out what this thing might be worth.
Hmm.
So
I,
now going back to the layout of the sticks or layout of the sheets, the other thing that you've got to think about, on your end, because you've got employees, is making sure that they understand how you laid that stuff out. Because you give them a bunch of 20-foot sticks and they start cutting, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of pieces on the ground that are drops that if they had laid it out differently on the on the stick, they might have actually been usable. I remember
yes.
dropping like lumber loads for houses, where we would buy the lumber and the framers would just provide labor, and they start pulling like 18-foot 2x10s off the pile because that was what was on the top, and cutting them for 14-foot joists. And there's all these 4-foot pieces of lumber on the on the ground, and then when they get up to the roof where they were supposed to be using the 18-footers, the only thing that's left is the 14s that were supposed to be used for the floor. They're going, hey man, we're short. It's like, no, you're not. You cut you cut 4 feet off of every piece of, of lumber over there. There should never be a piece of lumber on a construction site less, over a foot long if you're using the material right,
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you gotta think about that.
When I bid, I always, so even in my bidding, I do the longest length first.
Hmm.
And then, so if you've got 17, or let's just say you got 16-foot pieces, you cut all the 16-foot ones. And then, you can figure out, all right, well, I get the posts for the railing out of the drops of that 16-foot, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And then, so the rule of thumb in my shop, cut the longest pieces first
Yep.
and then work your way down, because that's the way I figured it. And then you can kind of just figure out the puzzle pieces from there. Oh, I have 14 of these, 28-inch pieces, and they're going to go, oh, I need 26-inch pieces. Oh, perfect. I'll just use
Hmm.
those. You know what I mean? Well, maybe I
Yep.
need 20 of the 26-inch pieces. Well, that's fine. I'll use up these first and then go see what the next biggest size is and then go from there. You know what I mean? And I always just order one extra stick because things happen.
Yep.
And we only get deliveries Tuesdays and Thursdays. And with being a small shop, we have to stick to our time frame. Our time is very, very valuable, especially when you're working 4 days a week. Because if that's, you have to really tighten up your processes and make sure you're ready and make sure that you hit the hours in those 4 days. Because if not, then you're in the fifth day and
Hmm.
nobody's coming in for an hour to, or even 2 or 3 hours to finish up on Friday. Like they want to get a minimum half day,
Hmm.
if not a full day. Well, you only account so many hours for this job. Then what do they do? Because you're paying them overtime for a job that wasn't bid at overtime. So it's super important to have, to have to, what, that extra $100 for that piece of 1.25 schedule 40 pipe, that's fine. We'll use it. We'll sit it on the shelf, and it might come in handy for a project down the road. We might need it for something,
Yeah.
but that $100 is, like 2.5 hours of somebody's overtime.
Hmm.
So I would rather just have that, it either could go to them or you have it as inventory for something else. And once they build up, you can just build that right into the next job. I build that into my price. I just build in an extra piece of most things. If it's 500, a $500 stick of 6x6 by half-inch tube, I'm not going to
Right.
get one extra one.
Hmm.
But half-inch pickets, 1.25 schedule 40 pipe, 2-inch square tubing, 1.5 inch square tubing. We've got that sitting on the rack. We've got multiple lengths just sitting there because,
Hmm.
we ordered them and they're extra. They're already paid for, and it was worth our time. It was worth the money to pay to have them sit rather than to put one or two guys behind, especially with finishing things. Well, I need this piece of it's Wednesday at, 5 o'clock, and you're like, oh man, I'm out of material, or I didn't order enough. We're supposed to be blasting and painting Thursday. Well, it's past the cutoff time for me to go get material on a Thursday. We're not
You're
getting
Tuesday.
anything till next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well, you just completely messed everybody's schedule up for Thursday, possibly Friday, more than likely Monday, because now stuff's not going to get painted or blasted because we're missing this one piece, you
Hmm.
know? So that little bit of precaution, I, I build it into the job, but it far exceeds the cost that it actually cost you, you know?
Hmm. No, no doubt. Like I say, especially for stuff that you'll use again. I mean, yeah, it's cheap insurance. It's cheap
Yep.
insurance. You can use that material someplace else. You're never getting back the hours of that that Friday overtime. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's just sunk cost. So
Yep.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, once you figure out what material you need, how much material you need to order, especially nowadays, I would say the most important thing is to make sure that you've got current pricing on your materials. I mean, I don't know what you're seeing, but down here we're starting to see prices come down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, God, I was paying $54 a sheet for 14 gauge steel 6 years ago. That at one point got up to almost $200. I think now it's down to about 130. Again, it's good that it's coming down, but tomorrow it could go up again. And
Yep.
it's just absolutely nuts. So make sure you got current pricing. And I would say, and I'd also add the caveat to that for, make sure you got it, you got current pricing for anything that's over $50. Like if you got, if you got to say, hey, I'm going to need some paint, I'm going to need a can of paint, whether a can of paint's $5 or $6 is kind of irrelevant. But anything that's going to cost you more than $50, make sure you've got a quote on, because otherwise you could be throwing money away. I mean, I think of having all these jobs that I've done that have had hardware like just nuts and bolts and hinges and stuff like that, where you could have $300, $400, $500 worth of just miscellaneous stuff that you didn't even think about. Some of these displays that I was doing, they all had casters on them. They wanted locking casters and the non-marring casters, so they weren't tearing up the floors and stuff. I mean, every one of those racks had $40 worth of casters on it. Mm-hmm. It had we were using this patina to kind of cover the grind marks in the corners and kind of blend them in with the mill scale. So I was buying this stuff from the company out in California at Sculpt Nouveau, mm-hmm. and it was $100 and something a gallon. Yep. And it only made sense to buy it by the gallon, because if you bought it in the little pint squirt bottles, it was even more expensive.
Yep.
So you take all that stuff and add it up. I mean, on a $5,000 display, there might have been $400 or $500 worth of miscellaneous junk that if you just kind of went, it's $100. It probably isn't just $100. It's probably $300 out of your pocket now, because you didn't take the time to to figure that kind of stuff out.
Oh man, I can't tell you the times where, well, I can tell you the times. It's happened like twice. I just ballparked hardware, mm-hmm. and when you get a bid package, they'll give you the drawings, and then they have, for some of the stuff, they'll have a whole another list of specifications, mm-hmm. where you got to go down, you got to find out what's going on in your section, and then read everything. And that'll tell you, what kind of hardware you need. Does it have to be stainless steel? Is it A325? You can't just ballpark what a Simpson concrete screw cost and then multiply it out. If they're calling for Hilti stainless steel hardware, that's $20 an anchor versus $4 an anchor. Times how many, I've my one particular job was I just being lazy. I just ballparked the hardware. Well, 3/4 inch A325 hardware adds up real quick, real quick. And you're talking $600 in just the hardware, on top of you have to ship that. So you can't just take the price that you see on McMaster and then multiply it out. You have to worry about shipping with that. Is it galvanized? Is it, it's all in the fine details. So hardware is something that you don't want to just ballpark on, because unless it's something that you're building yourself and what's going to cost and you can just multiply it out and it's okay. But if you're bidding on something where the specs are already called out, you better be sure that you've got your bases covered. I always go to, more recently, I've been going to McMaster-Carr. Before, it was a lot of Grainger and MSC. For bidding purposes, I'll just go on there, and with Grainger we have the Red Pass or whatever, so it's free shipping. So that one I don't have to worry about. But I'll go on and make sure that I'll check pricing, multiply it out, and then if I can shop around and get it cheaper once they sign the estimate and commit to the job, then I'll go shopping for it and see if I can find it cheaper. Some of the places local, if you buy it in bulk, you can get it cheaper. Mm-hmm. There's a place called Albin County Fasteners. They're super cheap for hardware, really cheap. Mm. But I don't use them for bidding, because what happens if they're out of stock and you have to go buy it at McMaster? Literally twice the price. So I always bid, McNichols. McNichols is one. But by far, they are the most expensive place to buy perforated sheet, woven wire mesh, galvanized steel treads. But you know what? Their bids usually come in within a day. So they don't have any pricing listed on their website. You have to request a quote. Okay, fine. I always bid with them because they'll give me a quote right away as in a few hours, and they're always the highest. Then I go to Direct Metals, because Direct Metals is significantly cheaper, and I'll say, hey, do you have this? Oh, sweet. It's $600 less on a $3,000 bill. You got it. But I I never bid with the cheapest place I can find because they might be out of stock. You know, I've talked to other people who have spreadsheets for their material cost, and that works out great if you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, if there's a lot of different stuff, I mean, not knocking having a spreadsheet, but especially like a couple years ago when prices were so volatile, the only pricing they can give you is for what they had in
Yep.
stock. So if you need 150 pieces and they've got 40 in stock, it could go up 5-10% on top of that. And you know, you don't know that because your spreadsheet is still on last week's price.
Hmm.
But they, you know, for some reason they're something got held up and they don't have it in stock and it's gonna be more expensive. So almost every, I mean, I always favor on the high side, but inch and a quarter scheduled 40 pipe, inch and a half square tubing, 2 inch square tubing, pickets. I have a pretty good idea of what
Hmm.
they're going to be because, you know, 10% on a, you know, $28 piece is not that much compared to 10% on a $900 beam. You know what I
Right.
mean? So for small stuff, I won't call and get pricing, but if there's a lot of different stuff, look, it takes 4 or 5 minutes. Call them up, tell them
Hmm.
what you got. He'll give you the total. He'll email it over to you and just cover your ass, you know?
Yeah, you weren't kidding about McNichols. I've used them a couple times, and yeah,
Goodness.
there's one probably 30 minutes from the house. Same thing, about 2 miles off the highway, which is
Yeah.
real convenient. And they, like you said, they you can email. I could email them now, and probably about at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning there would
Yep.
be a quote in the inbox, and they are very proud of their stuff. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, I had a lady wanted these. She wanted these bar rack, or, glassware racks behind her bar at her house, and she wanted the woven wire mesh. In fact, her interior designer specified the mesh, and it wasn't gonna be a full sheet, and I needed it all cut to size. And I'm like, I'm not gonna play with this stuff. And it was like $800 or something for one sheet of
Yep.
half-inch square, woven mesh. And I told the designer, I'm like, look, I don't care one way or the other, but this is $800. And she says, oh, that's what we want. I said, okay, no problem. And it was sitting in McMaster 3 days later, cut to size, and I was able to just drop them in, tack them off, and go.
Yep.
But there's definitely cheaper options.
Much cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, the other thing that I think people forget about a lot is all the consumables, wire, gas, grinding discs, sandpaper, all that stuff. I mean, it's all gone up in price too. I mean, it used to be a lot cheaper, and on a small job, it's not going to hurt you. But you get on a big project where you might burn through a 75 or $100 bottle of gas and a reel of wire, spool of wire, and some grinding discs and paper. You might have again $150-$200 worth of stuff that if you didn't put something in there. And I'm not saying you got to really hyper analyze and go, well, those discs are $2.79 a piece, and I'm going to need 6 of them. No, you're going to need $20 worth of consumables.
Mhm.
Just put something in there. If you're off by a couple dollars one way or the other, it's not going to kill you. But if you just forget about it, it's $20. I mean,
Yeah,
why leave it? Why let the customer get the benefit of you not throwing some money in there for it? So
absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, once you add all that stuff up, get your total material cost together, and that's kind of what I call kind of step part one. Your total material for the job, and then it's getting into labor. Um, and the thing I would say with labor is to break the project down into like discrete tasks and figure out what the time is for each of those tasks, and kind of break it up into either, depending on how big the project is and how finite you want to get it, either like 30-minute increments or 15-minute increments if you want to get a little more precise, or if it's a really small job. Um, and always bear in mind that nothing only takes a minute. I don't have to worry about that. That's good. There's no time involved in doing that. So some of the things you might see on a project, and if I miss any, jump in here. But the time to order, pick up, and unload material. We were talking earlier about there's a couple hours of taking stuff off the truck and putting stuff on the truck and making sure it's wrapped up and protected from the elements or from getting scratched or whatever. So you got to put money in for that. Setting up your work area. Um, I don't have the benefit of a really large shop, so if I've got something, big coming in, I'm, moving stuff around and pulling tables out of the way and pushing things over to the wall and setting up sawhorses or pipe stands or whatever. There's a certain amount of time involved in doing that. Obviously, it's not as big of a deal to spend an hour setting up the shop on a project that you're going to be working on for the next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to spend that same hour making all that stuff, moving all that stuff out of the way for what could be a 4-hour job. So make sure you got that factored in, right? Yeah, was it you that said you got like a big railing table that you move in and out, or was it somebody
Yeah,
else?
we do. It's the frame is rectangle tubing, and we have half by 10-inch flat bar
Mhm.
welded, and it's 42 inches deep, so you always know it's 42. And we leave a 2-inch space in between so that you can actually like almost like measure out by the foot, because from
Mhm.
one edge to the outside edge to the outside edge is 12 inches. And
Mhm.
we just run it down. You can, and that 2-inch space gives you, you can use any clamp you want to slide in there to hold it. It's got a backstop to it, so that when you're doing like square tubing or pipe or something like that, we have a, I don't know, probably 3 by 3 by 3/8 angle on the back, on one side of it, so that you can pre-stress where you can put like a 16th of an inch shim, put 2 clamps on either side of a post, and
Mhm.
pre-stress it when you weld it, so that you don't get that arch, that hump effect going all the way
Yep.
down. But pulling that in and out, you got to shuffle some stuff around. You got to get it. And if you're only one person, that's 15 minutes right there. If
Mhm.
you got two people working on a task to get ready for something, that's 30 minutes of man
Yep.
time right there.
Yep. Yeah, I did a panel job for a large, probably, oh god, there must be about, I think about 80 or 100 panels for a railing at a new park here in town. A friend of mine owns the fence company, and he had the contract, and he needed somebody to just kind of weld these panels up. So it was like a hog panel, and it had the bent edge, the radius channel that slipped over the top, and he
Mm-hmm.
wanted the corners mitered and kind of just make a frame. And I was like, there's no way I'm gonna do each one of these individually and set a set a square on each corner and tack it and keep moving around. So luckily they were all the same height. They were
Mm-hmm.
different widths, but I tacked two pieces of angle down to my bench the right width apart, so I could drop two of those pieces in, set them in, and slam it up against one side to get the one side welded, and then push it to the other side to get the other end welded. And like I say, it took a half an hour to set it up, but probably saved 3-4 hours of time on the back end.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
pretty
Like
good.
making jigs is I love making jigs. I love modular tables. We're doing about 800 linear feet of three, one, two, three line rail,
Mhm.
but the three line rail is only about 18 inches tall. So it's for the top of a wall.
Mhm.
And instead of measuring each one in between with the spaces and everything, we're just going to make a bar that's, take a piece of 1/4 inch flat bar. We're going to plasma cut, the top rail. We're going
Mhm.
to plasma cut the mid rail and plasma cut the bottom rail. And you take, if you got two guys working on a section, because we only have one railing table that's 20 foot long, I'm
Right.
going to throw two guys on there. You take half, you take half. You each get a set of jigs. There's no measuring. You don't have to
Mhm.
do anything. You just you clamp it up against that stop. You set the first one. They're all cut precisely. They're all notched precisely. Your post will find where they're. Only thing you have to do is square it up. Make sure it's square. Square it,
Mhm.
tack it, put this piece on, hold it, tack it in. You should be able to knock out these panels in like no time. Like,
Mhm.
because after everything's all cut and ready to go, just run with it, because you have a jig made. We
Mhm.
out back our shop, we have, oh my gosh, we make these sprinkler guards that go in between pallet racking.
Mhm.
And it seems like every company wants a different size. Like, it's same pallet racking. It's just, oh, these are 36 wide, these are 42 wide. Well, then it needs to come down 8 inches. This needs to come down 6 inches. So we have jigs out back, and I built in, an hour and a half to build or modify a jig for each size. So we have the setup charge to, that's like from 1 to 100. You get that that setup charge. After we build if your orders for more than 100, we absorb the setup charge because
Right.
we're good enough to make money on 500 of them that we don't have to charge you that hour and a half to modify the jig. But we've got 6 jigs out back that we might need again, and we're going to keep them because we do have the room to. I mean, we don't really have the room to keep them, but we do.
But you're not going to need them again until the day you decide to throw them in the scrap dumpster, and then the
Yes.
next week they're coming back.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but so, setup can, I mean, it can kill you, especially if you're working in a small shop. Some of the other things to think about if you're kind of breaking this down, and I got a little, I got a spreadsheet, a little spreadsheet I can probably send you to if we want to do that. How much time you set aside time for laying out all your cuts and any holes that you need to drill, right? Actually cutting the material, actually drilling and tapping holes, prepping for welding, cutting and beveling and cleaning everything, getting everything fit up. The actual welding, right? Cleaning and grinding all your welds, prepping your material for finish. If you're doing your sandblasting or even just wiping it down with acetone or whatever, depending on what you're using.
Mm-hmm.
All the time to load all the finished product on a pallet, strap it down, get it on a truck. Time to deliver, time to install. That's a dozen items that I just rattled off. And the funny thing is, everybody, I mean, it's even called the Welding Business Owners podcast, right? And yet welding is one of those 12 items. And that's the other, and that's, everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to be a welder. No, you're going to be a fitter. You're going to be a cleaner. You're going to be you're going to run your own business. You're going to be a whole
It'll be
lot of
everything.
things. And I said, I like to say that, I mean, you can teach a monkey to weld, right? Well, you can teach a robot to weld, right? I mean,
Yep.
they're doing it, right? But you're not necessarily going to teach a robot to lay out all those parts and get them cut and get them positioned and everything, for a unique job. Once it's all set, you can have that thing, put a really nice bead on it that probably doesn't need a whole lot of cleanup, but that's, a fraction of the overall, cost of, putting the thing together and the labor that you're going to spend. So,
Yeah,
once you
absolutely.
take off,
Yeah, it's I find that one of the things that I never thought about billing for until a couple of years ago was site visits.
mm-hmm.
How many times you get, hey, can you come check this out? No, no, I can't actually, because my time is very, very valuable.
Yeah.
I cannot come check it out. Like we put on our website free estimates.
Mm-hmm.
Free estimate is you send me pictures, you send me plans, we talk about it. And man, there's been a lot of times where I just I'll talk to somebody for an hour about their project because they're super passionate about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I get it, man. I get it. Like you don't want to be rude, but you're like, hey man, like I don't love this project as much as you do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let me go. I have other things to do. But you have to be nice about it. And just it's just part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
It's good customer service.
Yeah,
But
that goes back to the earlier thing about how many billable hours do you have? If you're trying to
mhm.
if you're trying to recoup that time into your billable hours, that's one thing. If not, it falls in that hey, here's the stuff I have to do outside of the time that I'm actually cutting and grinding and welding and doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a customer for, I mean, probably 7, almost 8 years. Like we've been making stuff, mostly roof ladders. They're actually
Mm-hmm.
up in North Jersey, and a lot of we do all their ladders, all their structural stuff, all their railings. And when I first started bidding stuff for them, I was super cheap. I really was. I was
Mm-hmm.
way, way too cheap because I wouldn't consider in that I have to drive an hour and a half to go up there, meet with the guy. You're always there for an hour. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
never like you just go there and you take measurements and you go and you leave. You're doing customer service. You're BSing with them. You're talking with them. You're just making connections and just you know that's 5 hours out of my day that I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
billing for. I'm like, oh man, I really, really need to do that. Um, Another thing is we have on like it's a line item on my well, maybe I should preface this before I say it. Some people, especially residential and really, really high end even contractors, They want their handheld. They
Hmm.
want to be involved with it. They want to talk with you. They want to understand. They're going to email you all the time. Some people are just, we're dealing with a company now. Um, they're just all over the place. They really are. There's, you know, as much as I dislike email threads, I get a new email about everything. And I'm like, I've got like no lie, I've got 40 emails about two different projects.
Hmm.
And we haven't even got a deposit yet because instead of just replying to an email, they send me a new one all the time. And I'm just like, my gosh, which email are you talking
Yeah.
about? Oh, well, I'm sorry. In this email, I sent you the plans for this job. And they're just, it is what it is. I'm not going to change them, but there is a value that I need to put on the inefficiency of working with people like that. And it's on my list. It's called the PETA tax, the pain
Hmm.
in the ass tax.
Oh yeah.
Like I put money on because I'm not going to be the guy who comes in low, especially with the residential and the high end stuff. You can't just be like, I'm in, I'm out. Like, just let me get my measurements. I don't want to talk to you. You need to woo them. You need to ask them how their kids are. You need to build the rapport because that's how you build your business. But you also need to understand that, like, you know, if you're going to do that, you have to make money on that. That is your time. And I didn't do that for a long time. So, I mean, it could be anywhere from 200 bucks to $2,000 depending on the job, because that's 20 hours of, it's not only just them of your time talking to them. It's, hey, we ran into a problem, we need you to come out here. Well, you can't raise your price after you've already started the job because you have to go out and site visit three more times.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to fly anywhere. You have to build that in because and you know what? If you build it in and you don't have to, it's gravy. That's okay. But you kind of have to, after you've done it for a while, you can kind of feel out the customers who are gonna, old people, man. Old people want to talk to you about their
They got
life.
nothing else to
They
do.
want
Yeah.
to, yeah, the retired people. They've got the money to spend. They saw this on the old ladies. They saw this on Pinterest. They want this. They want that. What color are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? They have a million questions that, because they've spent 20 hours researching this $400 project and they want to talk to you about it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I'm already 2 hours into it by the time that I'm out of there.
Yeah.
So it's don't discount the fact that some customers, because of just the nature of the business and the nature of who they are, you have to charge accordingly because your time is worth it, because there's a lot of inefficiency to hold in people's hands.
And don't think that that applies just to smaller projects. I guess about, it must have been this time last year, we went after a very large manufacturing project in South Carolina, like hundreds of millions of dollars. And at the first meeting with the client, we showed up with four people just to kind of introduce them to the company and all. And they had 34 people, I think, either in the room or on the call. And it wasn't like, sometimes you have that happen and like nobody says anything. There's really like only one or two people that are going to be involved. But I mean, like every single person had something to say. And when it came time to put the numbers together as like what we were going to charge them for we call it the pre-construction phase. You're only estimating and you know option analysis and everything else. It was like I said to the owner of the company, I said, look, this is literally going to cost us $1 million to do this. Oh, there's no way it could be that much. And we'll get back to that phrase later too, by the way. But there's no way, no way. And I think we went in with like $300,000 or $400,000 and got the job and spent 6 months, like you said, emails, nonstop emails, and not from one person, from like seven different people, and
Yep.
none of them would communicate with each other. So like you'd send me an email saying, "Hey, I need you to do, look at these three options for this system." Okay, fine. And then 2 hours later, it'd be another email from somebody else. Hey, I need to look at this. You're on the mechanical system, not knowing that I just dedicated half a day to doing stuff for the other guy, and it's like stuff just kept piling up, and it's like at the end of the job, it was like we should have charged them, three times what we did. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you can just see it. And I saw it, but nobody wanted to listen. Um, so you live and you learn, but in the meantime, you got a couple $100 million project out of it. So, you kind of absorb a little bit, but
Sure.
yeah, yeah. When it's a $500 project, not so easy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Or like even for like a lot of the listeners, it's the $5,000 project, it's the
Yeah.
$50,000 project. The $5,000 project, if it eats up an entire day, like think about the think about how long it actually takes to effectively write a concise and clear email response to
Mhm.
somebody. There's like it's it takes I mean you can people can argue if they want. There are people out there who say to switch gears it takes 15 minutes
Mhm.
to switch gears from one task to another. And I absolutely believe that because I
Mhm.
live that.
Mhm.
So if it takes you, if you're just blown through emails and you're not giving a whole lot of thought to it, yeah, sure. It really only takes the time of the email. Like it takes you to type the email out.
Mhm.
But if you think about it and you have to look at the schedule and you have to think, is that going to interfere with this and this and that? And like it's 10, 15 minutes per email.
Mhm.
Well, if that project before you do anything is 3 weeks long and you've got phone calls in there, you really could be at 5 to 8 to 10 hours of a pre-work before
Mhm.
you even start cutting material on it. And for a $5,000 job, that's you're not making any money then. Like you're giving it to them, you know? So
Yeah.
be real mindful of that all those man. I feel like this is just like the show called we should just name this like the hidden costs.
Yeah.
They're not really hidden, it's just some people don't see it because they've just never learned. And I like Facebook for a few things, but I feel like there's a lot of bad advice out there. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
really, really happy that you're on here to talk through this from a professional point of view. You know what I mean? I'm sure there are guys out there who make money just winging it with that bad advice. And honestly, it's not even that much of a knock towards them because they probably just don't even know either. You
Mhm.
don't know what you don't know. And if you're humble enough to realize, hey, maybe I don't really know, even though I've been doing this for 20 years, that's where all the growth comes from. But if not, you're just one of those guys out there spitting out the not so great information for the guys who are really trying to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about emails and shifting gears and stuff. I found there's a couple different kinds of people out there, and I don't know which side of the fence you fall on, but like I can switch gears fairly quickly and get back. And I tend to like if my phone dings and I've got an email or a text message, I'm picking it up and I'm checking it. I want to be able to respond right away if at all humanly possible, or if not, at least be able to say, hey, not sure right now. Let me get back to you tomorrow morning or on Tuesday or whatever. Then there's people who try to do that, and like you said, they get derailed for 15 minutes and can't get back into doing what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a couple people I worked with in the past that they basically like they check emails first thing in the morning and they check the emails late in the day. And I mean, on their calendar, they had a block of time set up, twice a day for responding to emails. And usually in their signatures, they would say, I respond to emails between, 8 and 9 a.m. and 4 and 5 p.m. Please don't take this personally or whatever, because there's all those people that want those responses like I'm giving them, within 5 minutes. And I wish I could do that, but it's just not, I'm not wired for it. I just can't let something, because what will end up happening is I'll read that thing in the morning and I'll spend the whole day thinking about it before I respond to it at 4 in the afternoon.
Yes.
So it's
I feel like
tough.
part of my problem is I'll see the email. So I actually did that for a while. I was super hard about just blocking my time out and being like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not checking emails. And it worked. It's there's the caveats of like, well, is something a rush? Well, am I waiting on the okay for this to get material so that we can order material and have it here by this certain day?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing high level stuff, things work kind of slow and you can do that. um, because I am like the owner and project manager of everything, and I do all the scheduling for the guys, things change all the time, every day. And I'm pretty good about switching gears. It depends what kind of, you know, it's whatever, but depends what kind of mood I'm in. Some
Mhm.
days I am just on it. I'm a monster, dude. I am getting stuff done. I'm walking around just sweating because I'm just like, I'm in it. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Not real friendly. I'm just getting shit done. But then there's other days where I'm like, all right, cool. I come in, I talk to everybody, and those are the days it takes me 15 minutes.
Mhm.
But, there is also a value to being able to reply back to people right away and be like, oh wow, they are really on it. They are really like, they've got it. They've got it. Um, I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it all kind of depends on what you're tailoring to, and
Mhm.
if you can even do that. I love I loved when I first started out. I used to reply back to emails right away all the time.
Mhm.
Now I let them build up. I'll usually check them, in the evening or the next day. But the problem is I look at them. I'll look at the preview. I'll look at the attachment, and it's in my mind. And it's like a poison, man. You
Yeah.
see it and you're like, oh, I really need to read that. Or, I try to, today's Sunday. I try to not do emails and stuff on the weekends.
Mhm.
Well, I've had an email from one of my really good customers that came in on Friday. Actually, I think it was Saturday morning. I saw it. I looked on my phone. I just like read a little bit of the preview of it. And it's been eating away at me because I know what it's about. And I know what it's about, but I don't know the answer to it. So it's been, every couple hours it pops in my head. I should read that email. No, you can wait till Monday. Mm, okay, I'll wait till Monday. And a couple hours later, it's like, oh, I need to. No, no, I'm waiting until Monday, and it just creeps back in, and it's almost like a poison.
Well, the one thing you don't want to do, because it'll screw up their expectations, is you don't want to reply to it on the weekend. You don't even want to say, "Hey, got your email. I'll get back to you on Monday morning," because now they think that they can pepper you with that crap,
Yep,
all weekend.
it opens the
You know,
door.
just manage their expectation that I'm going to get back to you on Monday. And I used to be bad about that too. I'd be responding to stuff at 10 o'clock at night, and I think part of it was that the project I was mentioning before, they were based over in Germany, so they were 6 hours
Mm,
ahead of us. So they'd be sending emails out, like they were getting in the office 8 a.m. their time, which was like 2 a.m. here. So I'd happen to, be half awake at 2 o'clock, and my phone would pop up, with a thing that I had a message or an email at 2:30 in the morning. I'm now I can't go back to sleep because I read that email. I finally got to the point. It's like, look, this thing is not going to just sit there. It's going to be like in the other room so that I can't get to it. So because otherwise, I said they would expect you to be, responding to their emails at 4 a.m. our time. No, 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 no.
yep.
Yeah. So yeah, so we talked about like say all the stuff that you got to add up time for, and once you get that all added up, you get a total number of hours. You're going to probably want to throw some factor in there for unforeseens, or hey, I thought maybe I overestimated how fast I could get something done. How much that is, I can't really say that there's a particular percentage or a number of hours. It kind of depends on the job. The more complex the job is, or the more uncomfortable you feel about how to how much time you have allocated to all these tasks. You got to tack something in there on top of what you've calculated. And with regard to calculating, a lot of guys that are that might be new are going to say, well, I don't know how much time it's going to take for me to set up, or I don't know how much time it's going to take for me to to do this. I mean, because I'll look at it and say, I've got in this display rack, I've got 60 joints that I've got to cut and prep and clean and weld. Well, you know what? Take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and go out there and cut a piece of pipe or a piece of tube and weld it and prep it and weld it and clean it up and see how long it takes you.
Hmm.
And now you say, okay, I know it's 10 minutes per joint, or per connection there. Multiply that by the number of connections and use that as a check to what what you came up with. So come up with that total number of hours, multiply by the hourly rate that you came up with, and that's your labor cost for the job.
It's funny. I did that one time for we made this alligator bar, and we
Yeah,
used
I've
inch
seen
and a
that.
quarter.
That thing is cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We did this inch and a quarter schedule 40 pipe, and we welded really cold welds on it. And I'm like, I have no idea how long this is going to take. So I went out there and I sat down and I just ran beads. And
Mhm.
I just, it was we only did it for I ran beads all the way around. And I'm like, oh, it's gonna take, I think it was like 20 minutes or something like that to go around like per to weld 1 foot of pipe. I'm like, all
Right.
right, cool, just multiply that out and you're good. Well, I didn't count how many weld passes I did. And I just had the guys rock and roll it, and they just went for it, not saying, okay, well, you can do, 26 passes on this, so put 26 lines and follow those lines. I just let them kind of roll with it, and without letting them, they didn't have the correct expectation, and I'm like, we're at the time that I bid for just the welding on the pipe, and we're like halfway done. I'm like, what's taking you guys so long? So I look at my piece and their piece, and I'm like, oh, you guys have way too many welds on here.
They're
I
running
should
like
have.
little eighth inch stringers, and you're running like quarter inch,
Well,
hot
I
passes.
mean, like they were like, yeah, they were like 1/8 inch wide, and like mine were 1/8 inch wide, but I spaced them out more, and they're
Mm.
like touching them slash overlapping them, and it just killed on time, and
Mm.
I was like, man, you know what? Like, next time I'll make my expectations a little bit more known because like that like it wasn't that big of a deal. It was probably a few dozen hours, but a few dozen hours, like we basically gave them that because
Mm.
I went out there and I ran the beads, but I didn't count them and I didn't let them know how many they needed because big thing in our shop is the expectations.
Mm.
Like part of my a lot of my learning was just letting people know the expectations of what things should do because I would just our bid sheet has evolved through like three different evolutions of things because you're 12 things up here. As my foreman started to get really step up and become a good foreman, he's like, well, you have 25 hours for this job, but what does 25 hours mean? Like what are your expectations for how long it takes to plasma cut and bend these pieces? How long do you have to make the handrails? How long do you have to make the stringers? Because that helps him keep everybody else
Mm.
accountable on the floor. And really it helps me um in the long run because now I can go back and say, okay, we got this job. When I we use Google Calendar and I put on everybody's you can block it out to like, I don't know, 10-15 minute
Yeah.
increments. So
Yeah.
I'll go in there and I'll say, cut pipe and coat pipe 3 hours for this. That's how long, like, everybody knows it. That's how long I have in the job for you to do that. That's my expectation. So your 12 tasks here of the whole, like the drilling, tapping, welding, prepping, grinding, cleaning, fitting, installation, delivery. I have to break all that out for my guys to understand what my expectations are. And, because you can't just say, all right, this should take 25 hours and go. I mean, a good fabricator will get it done in that or less time. But, as far as management goes, with to hold people accountable, you have to let them know what your expectations are. And that's one of the things that I've learned recently is to break out all the little cost of what it should take. Now, if you're just working by yourself, it doesn't matter so much. But I think it would be good. And,
Mm.
it is good because then you can look back and be like, all right, well, I had 15 minutes on drilling holes and it took me 45 minutes. I can now learn and get better next
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
we have job wrap up. Well, we have our work orders on the backside of our work orders because we're still on paperwork orders right now.
Mm.
It has the out like who did what and for how long and the date. And I try to tell them, I say, hey, mirror what I have on the front side. So if I have drilling, cutting, coping, welding, blasting, finishing, those are what my expectations are to see the hours it took on the backside. And it's funny because when we first started doing that, I got a lot of pushback because everybody was like, oh, well, I never held anybody accountable.
Hmm.
So we were just doing it and we would hit numbers or we wouldn't. But, I have to explain to them, this isn't just for you. This is for me. So right now, um, at the end of a job, he has a wrap up sheet and he'll take all those hours and he'll condense them down into something where I can look, instead of me adding up 40 line items of, well, you work on it for 2 hours here and an hour this day and whatever, he'll condense it down to drilling, cutting, tapping,
Hmm.
coping, whatever. And I'll be able to look back at that. And well, I do look back at that and say, all right, well, I was low on hours here, I was high on hours here, I hit just here. It helps me become a better estimator in the future. And it also helps me to understand people's strengths because some people are amazing at welding and they're lightning fast. Other guys, they're putting on bird spatter and they're having to grind it off and it takes them twice as long. Some
Hmm.
guys are really good at the coping and the mitering and the layout of things, and other guys just struggle. So if I see that this guy he was, 25% over an hours, maybe that's because, maybe I was wrong in my bidding, but maybe it's just not his strong suit and we'll just have him not do that in the future. So
Hmm.
writing all those things down and putting a, a, a 15-minute, 30-minute increment into each one of those tasks, it's not only helps keep your guys accountable, but it also helps them know the expectations and it helps you get better as long as you go back and look at it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, 'cause to sit there and say, well, we had 30 hours allocated for this job and it took 40. What happened?
Mm-hmm.
Well, 10 hours. You don't know where those 10 hours were, so you don't know. Like you said, if you were shy up, you were short on the first time, on your first estimate, or if it was, just this particular piece was too short or that particular piece. So if you break it down, you can say, well, I had 5 hours for cutting and coping, and it
Mm-hmm.
actually took 8. Well, now next time to bump it up and have 8 hours built in there, or like you said, have somebody else do it if it was the matter of the person, not a matter of the task at hand. Because otherwise, I mean, like I said, you're not going to grow. You're not going to get any better. You're going to continue to make the same mistakes over and over again, and nobody wins in that situation.
Well, it's also, it helps you um be a better leader of your team
Hmm.
because like with my team, my guys are always busy. Like we might not hit hours, but I have no doubt that they were busy during that time. Like I've never had a problem with guys just standing around. Um, that's never been a thing. But if you go to your team and say, "Hey, we had 30 hours bid, it took 40 hours. Why did it take so long?" Everybody's going to look at you and be like, well, I was busy. I was working. Like
Hmm.
you don't want to be the guy who's almost like accusing them of not working or working
Right.
hard enough when they felt like they were working hard enough. If you're able to break it down in the task and say, okay, well, why did it take you so long to load the truck and get on the road? We
Hmm.
had this issue the other day. All they had to do was they had to cut two pieces of angle and grab like something out of the sea container, and it took them two guys an hour and a half, an hour and 15 minutes to cut two pieces, load it on the truck, and get out of the shop. I'm like, dude, like that's 2.5 man hours right there. Like that should have taken one person 30 minutes. Like what happened? But they were busy, but they
Hmm.
didn't work efficiently. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So instead of being coming at them at a in an accusatory manner, you can say, okay, well, this is the hours that I had figured out. It took you this long. How do you think that would, like, where do you think it went wrong? And really, what really helps is in the mornings for our morning meeting, we have a morning meeting, 5-10 minutes,
Hmm.
and we go through the day and say, all right, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. The guys who are having trouble hitting hours, you can ask them and say, hey, does this make sense? Do you think that this is attainable? because we had a team member who was constantly not hitting hours, like always over. And so I started asking him, like, hey, do you think that 5 hours to set the paint booth up, mix the paint, load it on the rack, bring it in there, spray one coat, clean the gun, and then pull it out of the paint, is that attainable? Because then you have their buy-in.
Hmm.
If it, you make your expectations known, you ask them if that's attainable. That way, instead of you imposing this should take 5 hours, you ask them, do you think you could do it in 5 hours? You're going to get a much different work ethic out of somebody when you ask them and they agree that they can do it in that amount of time versus telling them how long it should take. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know why, but suddenly I've become like infatuated with pipe rail fences. Like that shitty, dirty, rusty stuff that they do down in Texas with old drill pipe and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I've been watching YouTube videos on and on about this stuff, and I'm going like, nobody does that stuff here probably because they can't get the pipe. But if I could find the pipe, maybe that could be like a unique little thing. Not necessarily that I want to run, thousands of feet of this stuff, but maybe do some gates and some entryways and stuff. But I'm sitting there watching these guys, and I'm going like, how it, to cut and cope those pipes, because it's not like, when you're doing it in the shop and I can cut, 50 pieces all 8 foot 7.5, and it's all going to line up exactly on my jig table. These guys are out there doing it, with uh, posts that have already been set in the ground.
Yeah.
And the top one ain't necessarily the same as the bottom one. It sure isn't the same as the one in the next section. And you could never really get a good handle as to how long it takes to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one guy who was doing it. He was doing it at his own shop, his own farm. And he even said, I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm trying to figure out. I got 500 feet of this stuff to do. I don't know if it's going to take me 3 days or 3 weeks. So he timed himself on how long it took to cut saddles on the end of 3 pipes, which is enough to do one section of fence. And he did the little the fast forward thing on the video, and it was 45 minutes. It's like, so now he has something measurable to be
Mm-hmm.
able to say, okay, it took me 45 minutes to do this. Hopefully, by the time he's done doing 500 feet of it, he's down to 35 minutes or even 40 minutes or something. But you don't know. You don't know because you haven't done it yet. So how do you accurately budget it up front? And then how do you hold the guy accountable if he didn't meet your number? You said 45 minutes, but you've never actually done it, and it's actually an hour. Like you said, is it that he's moving too slow, or I didn't give him enough time in my estimate?
Yep.
But between the two of those numbers, the next time you go and price that, you'll have a better understanding because you're not just tracking, 40 hours instead of 30. You're tracking, this task should have been 4 hours and it was 5.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And because you're able to, we have the job wrap up sheet in 2 years when we go and we get a job that's real similar, because that
mm-hmm,
happens all the time. You're like, oh, I did something just like that. Well, you know what? Just go in the folder, look back, and see where you were with things. What, like, maybe you upgrade it in tools, you can go faster. You can
mm-hmm,
cope the pipe with your iron worker versus trying to use a drill bit, or a hole saw. You know what I mean?
yep,
But like having something to go back to and tangible to put your hands on for that, like down the road. Because I mean, and you have to do it right away.
mm-hmm,
You can't wait to do that wrap up sheet for 2 weeks down the road, because you're gonna forget.
mm-hmm,
Like in our wrap up sheet is things that went bad, things that went really well, things that we could do better next time, and we spell it out right there. That way, because you know when we look back from like the same job last year, and it's like, oh well, what could we have done differently? um we have, we do some repetitive stuff, and we keep track of who did what for how long on that previous job. That way it's like, all right, well, here's the number to beat. Can you beat that? It's almost like a challenge for the guys,
mm-hmm,
because we have it down to like, all right, we as far as keeping track of things, we keep track of things down to 15 minutes. But for bidding purposes, I'm usually an hour, maybe
mm-hmm.
like a half hour for, to throw anything on a plasma table. to draw it and put the material on, cut it, deburr, and move the material off, you're at minimum 30 minutes,
Mhm.
usually like an hour. So, but it's really helpful to have that to go back to and be like, all right, well, this is what we did it in last time. This is what we could have done better. Maybe we'll use a different machine next time, and or we'll stack them differently, or we'll, XYZ, and it's written down on paper, not even on paper, like even PDF form. Because we have a lot of that stuff in Microsoft Word.
Mhm.
Um, but it's just really important to write it down, because if not written down, it never happened. Kind of like
No, and
contracts.
exactly. And with regard to tracking it too, I mean, I don't know if you're using it or not, but I mean, if you're not using Microsoft Excel to track, to do your estimates and the tracker stuff, I mean, you're really missing out on a lot. It's not a really hard program to learn. I mean, I've taught seminars to show people how to do it, and it's like, it's simple math. I mean, it's no different than you writing down, I've got 10 of these at $3 a piece, and you're doing the
Mhm.
math and saying 10 times 3 is $30. You just put a formula over there that says, 10, this cell times that cell is equal to that. It takes a little bit of extra time up front to do it the first time, but then you've got that template. Your railings that you're doing a lot, you could have on a template. I mean, I do it. I've got templates for whole building types, and we've got a template for for an office building. Somebody comes along and says, hey, I want this building, so big, so tall, so many, this kind of exterior and all. How much do you think it's going to be? I mean, we've done so many of them. We have that template kind of automated, put a budget together on a $30 million project in an hour, because it's in that template.
Wow.
And now you have that template from all those past projects to be able to refer back to and go, well, this one was this much and this one was that much, so that you can validate where your costs, are your costs right? Because again, you heard me say before, that it can't possibly cost that much. Yeah, it can. Yeah, it can. I mean, that particular phrase has probably bit me in the ass more times over the years, because you second guess yourself. And if you don't have anything to reference back to see, you know, could it really cost that much? You don't know. And you
Yep.
may end up, going, well, there's no way that thing could be $30,000. I must have made a mistake somewhere. I'm only going to charge them 28. And guess what? You're probably, leaving $2,000 on the table at a minimum,
Yep.
and potentially, you know, losing $2,000 for not having that, that sanity check from looking at something before, and talking yourself out of the number being right. You've never done that, right?
I still do that all the time. I added up. I'm like, how is that one ladder like $8,000?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, that doesn't make that. That's not. It can't be right. I
Yeah.
go back and I check my numbers. I'm like, it is like I'm right with this. It just like in my scope of mind, it doesn't seem right, but
Mm-hmm.
it is. So yeah, I find myself fighting that urge to talk myself down in price
Mm-hmm. And
because
you
of
try, you'll
what
you'll
I
find a way to
think.
rationalize it. You'll
Yeah,
definitely find a way.
yeah. And it's like, like it's I've I've I have to fight the urge sometimes. I'm not gonna lie, I do.
Yeah. And you never do the opposite. You never go, it can't only be $5,000. That's got to be like $9,000. You never talk yourself up. You always try to talk yourself down.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got it. We touched on material and labor. The other thing that is all the other costs, like you were talking before about, powder coating, your subcontracted costs for powder coating or galvanizing. Galvanizing's gotten stupid lately too,
Oh
hasn't
my
it?
God. Well, I
um,
mean, not to take this on another tangent, but
yeah.
like it goes back to the whole anytime everybody's like, I want something galvanized. I'm like,
Mm,
are you sure? Because it's going to cost you $2,000 for anything. Doesn't matter.
yeah.
Because our galvanizer is 2 hours away. That's the
Mm,
closest American galvanizer, 2 hours away.
mm,
VNS in VNS Lebanon, VNS Perth Amboy is still 2 hours. Even though I don't go to them, I go, it's so you're 2 hours there, you're 2 hours back, 2 hours there, 2 hours there back to drop it off, two
mm,
hours there and back to pick it up. And then it's that's 8 hours, but it's 2 hours drive time.
mm,
So it really equals like a 10-hour day. Like for us right there, that's that's $1,000
mm,
of just drive time to take this to the powder coater. And they're $500 minimum if you have two brackets or two roof ladders, doesn't
Mhm.
matter. It's $500 plus, if you have to pay tax on it and then plus a little bit of profit on there, it's $2,000
Yeah.
to galvanize anything. And people, I'm like, are you sure? Can we cold galvanize this? I
Mhm.
explain them like the cold galvanizing, and 90% of the, 80% of the time they're like, yes, we can do that.
Yeah. But like that's a matter of you being able to exercise some judgment too and help them understand whether it does or doesn't need to be galvanized. Because I mean,
Value
if you leave
engineering, yeah.
if you leave it up to the architect or the engineer, everything's galvanized or everything's stainless or every it's like, guys, this is absurd. I mean, we've had projects where they've got painting specs that require you to like shot blast all the steel and grind all your welds down to a certain AESS finish level as far as how smooth it has to be, and no spatter, no nothing, and coat of Tnemic primer. Have you ever seen Tnemic listed anywhere? I don't know if you ever dealt with that stuff. I
No, I
mean,
haven't.
it is just outrageously expensive to the point where I mean you'd be like, there's no way that it could cost that much. Well, yes, there is the way it could cost that much if that shows up in the spec. Um, and then you look at it and it's like, guys, this is for something that's never going to see the weather. Why are we doing all this stuff?
Yep.
So you got to. But if you don't raise your hand and just price what's there, then you get that. It can't possibly be. Yes, it is because of what's in the spec. So
Yep.
yeah. But I mean, things like equipment rental. Do you own any of your own like little lulls and that kind of stuff?
We have a spider
So,
crane. We have two forklifts, but none of them go on site.
mm,
Um, I mean, equipment rental, man, it's so cheap that
mm,
like every time I need to rent a man lift, I'm like, I should buy a man lift.
yeah,
What are they, $4,000 or $5,000?
yeah.
But what is it for a month to rent it? Like $1,200? I'm
Yeah. And then
like,
you got to drag
for
it around. You got to load it and
yeah,
unload it, and
you need
save brakes
a
and
tilt deck
yeah,
trailer. You need
yeah,
all. I'm like, I can't justify that. I just
yeah.
can't. So, equipment rental is one of those things. We have I mean, 3, 4 engine drives, and so we don't
Mm,
run anything like that. But
mm,
yeah, telehandlers. I try to piggyback off of, I'll put it in like in my estimates. I'll say price includes this, price excludes this. And a
mm,
lot of time it's equipment rental, unless they specifically say including equipment rental. Because a lot of, if we're dealing with the GC, they probably already have a low on site. They've already
mm.
got a dumpster there. You don't need to get your own dumpster.
Right.
You don't need to get your own porta potties because they've already got them there. So we just communicate with them pretty well about what to do,
Yep.
as far as that goes. But yeah, well, and prices could vary greatly depending on where you rent it from and delivery cost.
Hmm. Yeah, and where it is too. I mean, there's that large project I was telling you about before. I mean, there's not an equipment rental yard within probably an hour and a half of
Hmm.
that job site. Like, so if you need something, you've got to. It's basically coming tomorrow at best. If something breaks at noon today, it's not getting repaired until tomorrow or replaced until tomorrow at best. So we've actually there were a couple projects where some of the bigger companies like Sunbelt have started setting up yards on site where they have all the equipment there
Wow.
and you rent from there and it's all barcode scanned. So like if you came to that job and you needed a man lift, you don't have to call anybody. You just go over to the yard and you say, hey, I need a 60-foot aerial lift, and they go, yep, yeah, there's three of them over there. Grab one, and as it goes out the gate, it gets scanned and it gets charged to your company
That's
for
crazy.
yeah,
I've
in like
never
50,
seen that.
yeah, it is wild, man. I mean, at first I was like, this is ridiculous. But then you start thinking about it. It's like, first off, if you only need it for 2 hours, you're only paying for 2 hours. You pay from the minute it ticks out the gate until the minute it ticks back through the gate.
Hmm.
If it breaks while it's out there, and the thing goes bad, there's three more sitting over there. You just go grab another one, or they'll bring you one on the other side of the site. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool, and I think we'll probably see more of that, over time on bigger projects.
Just shipping alone.
Mm-hmm.
If for a job that lasts a year, you only have to ship that stuff one time.
Mm-hmm.
Versus if you've got different companies who rented, you only get a month here and a month there. That could be 4, 5, 8 times the
Mm-hmm.
the labor and just shipping,
Yeah.
versus just shipping it there once. You set up a sea container office, put a chain link fence around, and call it a day for
And
the
that's
next two
exactly what they
years.
did. That's exactly what they did. And they got a
Crazy.
full-time mechanic on site. So pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And I'm just trying to think of other, other costs that you may incur. I mean, you've done some stuff fairly far from the office, but have you done stuff where you had overnights and per diems and stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yep.
So you got the cost of all that, and again, it comes down to, make sure you know what this stuff is going to actually cost. I mean, if you just throw, it used to be you can get a hotel room for, $50 a night. And I don't know that the last time I've seen a hotel anywhere for less than, $100 or $150 a night. So make sure you're reaching out to, the local hotels and find out
Yeah.
what it's going to actually cost you with all the taxes and crap. Because again, you plug $100 in and it ends up costing you 150. It's not bad if it's one night, but if you're up there for 3 weeks, it's just kind of chunking into your profit again. So,
Absolutely.
why do that?
We'll so because our crew is small, we'll and we don't go away for that like two, maybe 3 nights at the most. Like it just pays to get a hotel. Like anything over 2 hours, it just pays to get a hotel and give
Mm-hmm.
the guys per diem because it's to pay three, four, five guys to travel 2 hours one way and 2 hours back the next day. That's 4 hours of travel per person. That's 20 hours of travel for five guys
Right.
per overnight. Just save the driving, save the fatigue, get a decent Airbnb for, 400, $500 a night and give everybody and go out to dinner. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So we don't do any long-term stuff. So we usually stay at Airbnbs if we can. If it's just like two guys, it's easier just to get a hotel. But I
Right.
remember, like we'll do Holiday Inns because they're pretty
Mm-hmm.
standard everywhere. They're decent enough. They're not like I don't know, cut rate motel, but they're
Mm-hmm.
definitely not the Hilton, So like it used to be 120 bucks a night. You could get some maybe 150 if you're
Yep.
doing it last minute. Man, you're it's like 200 like 180 to 230 bucks a night now
Mm-hmm.
for depending where you are. And usually even during the week, it's still like about 200 bucks. I'm like, man, like it freaking adds up quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now it's like, why, again, why give that away? Make the phone, make a quick phone call, hop on the internet, get a number, and plug in the right value for what it's actually going to cost you for that. Because
Yep.
once you add all this stuff up, so you got material, you got labor, you got all these other costs, you got to add you got to add for profit, right?
Yep. Ain't doing
And
this for out of the goodness of your heart.
yeah, and I think that's where a lot of guys fall, kind of fall flat and don't understand. They think that they confuse owner's salary or payroll or whatever you'd want to call it, like the money you actually get for working in the business, with profit. They say, "Oh, I made $3,000 profit on that job. I use it to pay my bills." Like, no, that's not for paying your bills. I mean, you should be paying your bills out of all that other stuff that we've been talking about for the past 2 hours. And profit is what you get for taking the risk of being in business for yourself, right? It's you can use it to grow the business. You buy a piece of property, build a shop. You can use it for buying more equipment. You can set it aside for those those times when you've got no work. You get a
Mm-hmm.
lull, or when COVID hit. I know you did really well during COVID, if I remember, from what I've heard on uh, some of the other podcasts. But a lot of guys, I mean, they really took a pounding if they were tied to projects that got shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So have that set aside to where whether something unexpected like that, or God forbid, to put money aside for retirement. I mean, that's something that no, so few people think of in when they're small, especially when you're 20, 25 years old, getting started in this kind of stuff. You don't think about that kind of stuff. You don't think about your kids' retirement or your kids' college and weddings and all that kind of stuff that's gonna come up that you're gonna need to cough up money for. Well,
Yep.
that's what profit's for, man. And I don't know if we want to throw percentages out there or anything, but I mean, it should be
Yes.
something
People, people,
reasonable.
people want to hear. I mean, I get so many questions and I see so much bull crap out there
Yeah.
of what to mark things up, and
Hmm.
like 100% on material. Okay, yeah, good luck trying to do that on like a $50,000 steel order. That's like
Right.
you're just not gonna have like. So talk to me about, do you do a percentage across the board? Do you mark up labor differently? Do you mark up steel prices differently? How does like what does that look like for because I think it also depends on what you do. If
Hmm.
you're putting up prefab steel buildings, like I was talking with Nate from over at Battleborn Welding, they can't put 30, even 20% on $500,000 worth of steel.
No,
Like
no,
you're just
exactly.
not going to get the job. So if
Yeah.
you're if they're bidding at 10%, well, you like you can't be marking up a stick of pipe 10%. You know what I mean? Like you're not
Hmm.
making enough money there. So what like I think that kind of all the it might depend on the area, it might depend on the industry, but talk to me a little bit about what you see with that.
So this goes back to what I said at the beginning about these some of these programs out there that say, oh, you add all that stuff up together and then you put a 60% markup on it for for overhead and profit. And it's like that doesn't work in the real world in many cases, and it can kind of leave you short if you base your entire business plan on having that 60% based on some amount of volume, whether it's so much for contractors, so much material, so much this, so much that, because you took all that overhead and everything that we were talking about earlier, your insurance and your vehicle costs and your shop costs and everything, and you put it in that bucket, somewhere else to mark up. And if the money that you have to mark up, like say for example, you had based it on $100,000 worth of material being used in the course of the year, and you only used $50,000 worth of material, well, you lost all the markup on that. So better to put it, I think by having it in that labor cost where your labor cost is already burdened. It's covering your insurance, it's covering your taxes, it's covering all the true costs of you know, being a business owner and operator, and so you're kind of making your money on the labor. If you can mark up your material a little bit, obviously that's good. If nothing else, it covers you for, oh crap, I came up a stick short, or I forgot I was short on the hardware or whatever, cover you for that. Um, but normally what we see on bigger projects is, we'll see the labor, it'll say estimated man hours, 340 hours at whatever the rate is. And normally we would have to ask, you'd have to, send in a labor cost breakdown that says, a welder makes $35 an hour and his taxes are so much and his insurance and his benefits and everything, and that translates to $57.50 an hour. Okay, so we take the number of hours times that labor rate, and that's the labor portion. Material, sometimes there's a little bit of handling markup on it, but like you said, everybody knows what steel costs on the
Hmm.
bigger projects, because I get a sheet every week from Nucor that tells me that what they're rolling that week and what the cost per ton is, and any anticipated, it's good until the ink on the printer dries, but it's if they know something is coming, they'll say, hey, we're expecting a 10% increase next week or whatever. But again, if steel is costing $1,850 a ton, it's kind of hard for you to put a bid in that's got $3,000 a ton in there for steel. Okay, and
Yep.
realistically, where's that money going? I mean, is it pure profit? I mean, are you truly, like you said, going to be able to make 50% on the cost of your material? I mean, that'd be great if you could, but somebody else isn't going to be doing that. So normally we'll see, let's say material, we'll see labor, we'll see the other stuff that we're talking about. If there's subcontracted costs or there's equipment rentals, we'll see those broken out, and then typically there'll be a line for overhead and a line for profit. And the numbers you normally see, like a lot of times, is dictated in the contracts from our owners to us, and then that kind of flows downhill to the subcontractors as well. It's usually 10 and 5 is what we see:
Mm.
10% overhead and 5% profit. Um, which everybody just kind of rolls with that, and it seems to work. The goal obviously would be you got to keep your overhead within that 10% bracket, and you got to be happy making 5%. Um, we didn't, as we've been saying, we haven't really mentioned overhead. And the reason I haven't really brought it up is because again, it's kind of all rolled into the labor number. I mean, if
Mhm.
you if we're talking about, you know, one person or two person shops for the most part, you have no overhead. You know, you don't have a you know, an HR department, you don't have a, you know, an accounting staff, you don't have a payroll group, you don't have any of that stuff that generally falls into overhead. Anything you do have, like your shop costs or your, you know, your equipment costs and insurance and all, is rolled into that labor cost. So
Mhm.
there's really no overhead to cover. Now, again, if you get on a job that, you know, that has the ability for you to charge 10% overhead and 5% profit, that's great, because it's 10% that you're going to get as a markup that you're not going to spend. So it kind of just
Sure.
becomes profit, right? But yeah,
What size jobs are you looking at that type of markup? Is that like, 5% on, $2 million jobs? Because I see with a lot of the smaller shops, 20-30% profit on top of, for a $5,000-$10,000 job. That's a lot more reasonable than making a couple $100 on the job. You know what I mean?
right,
Like,
right.
the bigger the number, the you can roll. I mean, you can make a boatload of money at
Mm-hmm.
5% if your jobs are multi-million-dollar jobs. Whereas small guys, out there who are doing 5, 10, 20, $50,000 jobs, like, what do you see for that? Because from what I see about 20%.
Mm-hmm.
I see about, that's a reasonable number
Mm-hmm.
for profit on smaller jobs like that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say on a smaller project like you're talking about, even, you know, it's $100,000 or more, you know, 15 to 20% is, you know, I would say, you know, is expected or is acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge that you have is if you're bidding to, you know, if you're working on as part of a larger project, like say you were going to just provide the miscellaneous metals for a $35 million warehouse. All you were doing was a couple of roof ladders, some dock stairs, and, you know, some downspout guards and stuff. So you might have a, I don't know, let's say it's a small one. You've got a, you know, a $70,000 contract. Well, depending on how the GC's contract is worded, it may require those breakdowns. Usually, think government jobs and stuff that have public funding and stuff that require that
Mm-hmm.
level of breakdown, and you would have to show that breakdown we were talking about a minute ago with the labor, material, and everything else. So then you just kind of fudge it a little bit and put, you know, a little bit more in the
More in the
material. You
area.
raise your hourly rate a little bit, so at the end of the day, it all kind of washes out. But you're showing that 10 and 5 to match their form. There's a lot, you know, a lot of private jobs they'll never really ask, other than for change orders. Normally, your base job, like if it was, hey, all these dock stairs and everything are, you know, $75,000. It's like, look, I don't care what your breakdown is. Just give me a price of $75,000. If that fits my budget and it kind of ties in with, you know, what everybody else is charging,
Mm-hmm.
$75,000 it is. But if you're asked to make a change, like, you know, I got to go in and I got to, you know, reinforce a couple roof joists because they added an air conditioning unit up on the roof, and you got to put a frame in for that or something, and we want you to do it, you know, time and material, because it's, you know, we don't have time for you to go back and work up a bid and everything else. You just need to get it done. Then we would expect to see that so much material, so many hours of labor at that rate, you know, 10% and 5%.
Mm.
So, you know, I guess the, you know, the theory is you kind of made the good money on the base job, and nobody likes change orders. You know, some don't. Yeah, everybody thinks, oh, everybody, you know, like the owners think we love them. It's like we don't make any money on those things. I mean, our fees, you know, you don't want to see what the general contractors' fees on, or on, you know, 30-40 million dollar jobs. They're a fraction of the percentages that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I want to get in, I want to get out, I want to get done, because I want to move on to the next project. So I don't want change orders. And I'm sure you're the same way. You've got a certain amount of time set aside for this job, and you got 4 other jobs behind it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get there and get done. You don't want to be screwing around for an extra 3 days because somebody changed their mind on something, because that's 3 days that the guys aren't back in the shop working on the next project, and you got to push that one out. So I don't think
Yeah.
anybody likes change orders.
It's funny because I don't we've been asked for cost breakdowns a few times,
Mm-hmm.
but usually it's just because of you know, our jobs are sub like 300,000 is like
Mm-hmm.
most of our jobs. But it's more about the AIA billing of
Yep.
like putting in, all right, well, what was this portion of the job? What was this portion of the job? Well, this portion's 50% done, but you haven't done any of that. So, you need to divulge how much each of all that cost, because, for people who aren't familiar with AIA billing, it's, you break
Schedule of
out each,
values.
what's that?
The schedule of values is that
Yes.
whole back page.
Exactly. So it's not just, it's a 3 month job and you bid 33% at a time. It's however much done
Mm-hmm.
that of your of the of if there's six things in your contract, six different scopes of work in your contract. Well, the first month you might only have 5% of it done. And
Uh-huh.
the second month you might only have 15% of it done. But because like you can't give them a bill in that billing cycle, that 30-day billing cycle, for the other 50%,
Yeah.
when most of your 80% of your work is in the third month. So I think that, like, I think, because there's that adage, there's that whatever meme out there. It's like, well, can we have a cost breakdown of your bid? And people were like, it's $0 to do it and it's this much to do it.
Yeah.
Yes, that works sometimes, but there
Mm-hmm.
are, like, when you play with the big boys in the big lead, you have to be able to give them the pricing of it, and don't be afraid to tell them that, we put in profit here because, we don't do this for free.
Yeah.
I think there was one time where I really had a, um I can't, it was a couple years ago, because they had to, like, subtract stuff out of it. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, oh, well, like, if you're going to take $7,300 out of it, like, what 7,300 was your labor, what was the material? And I got a little bit like, I'm like, I'm not going to tell you, like, that's none of your business. But then I realized, I was like, oh, this is actually a pretty standard thing to, to be asked for.
Yeah. To be totally honest, I don't want to make you run through all that kind of stuff. Number one, number two, I don't care how much you're making. Because the way it works is, say, for us on these bigger projects, we might get involved, 6, 8 months ahead of time, and we put a budget together for a project, and let's say that we've got, $300,000 in there for your scope of work. When your number comes in, it's under $300,000. Great. We're under budget. Everything's wonderful. I may have an owner who wants more information, but for the most part, if your number is 300 and somebody else is 305 and somebody else is, 320, I'm happy. I don't need any more information as to how
Mm-hmm.
you got there. Now, I may ask you down the road about costs, like, hey, how many tons of steel did you have? And, because I wanted to be able to build that backup information for myself for the future, to be able to say, well, last time I paid X number for, um, for the steel. Or I may ask you how many labor hours you have, or how many weeks you're going to be out there, or how many days you're going to be out there, just because, again, I want to make sure my schedule is right, that I've got the
Mm-hmm.
right amount of time in there for how long it's going to take you to do it. Um, the only other time I may ask for more information is if I've got three bids at $300,000 and you're either at 200,000 or you're at $400,000. Now, maybe I'm not even going to waste my time with you if I got three other numbers, but if I got numbers that are all over the place, um, I may ask you and say, hey, look, what do you got in there for labor hours? Or what's your
Mm-hmm.
total material cost? Or, hey, there was that really weird glass guardrail. How much is that worth out of your $300,000? Just so I can kind of get everybody level set to the same, to make sure that somebody didn't go, I got three guys telling me that glass rail is $100,000 and somebody's telling me it's 20. I think I just found my problem.
Yep.
Because somebody obviously didn't make a phone call and find out that that railing is $100,000. Going
Mm-hmm.
back to making sure you got a hard number on everything. So I don't want to get into your shorts and know how much you're making, because I don't care. I mean, I know
You're
everybody's
just
in
there to
this
get the
business
job
to make.
done.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's here to make money. I mean, we're not, like I said, we're not in this for fun. I mean, well, I am sometimes when I'm out in the shop, doing stuff, when I'm not at my day job. But yeah, I don't want, I don't want to give you any more work than you need to. I want you to be out there in the shop getting stuff done, not, playing accountant for me.
Yep.
So, all
Absolutely.
that said, I mean, part of how you come up with how much markup you can put on there is you got to just start feeling the market out and seeing where you're landing. If you're putting 20% on everything and you're consistently being told you're 10% high, one of two things is happening. Everybody else is at 10%, or everybody else figured out a faster way to do things or a better
Hmm.
way to do things to get their costs down. Because there's only a couple places that there could be variances. I mean, material for the most part, if you're competing against the same level of people, you're probably all paying about the same for material. Because you're not buying 10,000 tons a week and getting it cheaper than anybody else. Um, you got you're more efficient with your with your labor, or you got some equipment that gets you to get stuff done a little faster, or you've got you got more markup or less markup than everybody else at the end of the day. Yeah, there was a guy had posted something the other day on a Facebook page. It was a picture of it was a gate, I think, and he started talking about it. He's like, hey, I'm just double checking what everybody thinks the price on this thing should be, because I've got like 27 hours in there on this thing, plus $800 of material. So I'm thinking it should be like, $14,000. And I'm going, first off, it's a 10-foot wide gate. It ain't worth $14,000. Second of all, how the hell did you have 27 hours in fabricating and installing this gate? The $800 of material probably seemed about right. But I'm thinking you got to learn how to move a little faster, because you shouldn't be taking 27 hours. And that's where the problem was. They said just
Yep.
having that little bit of breakdown, information on that, on that kind of told you where his problem was. He was just not as fast as he should be, because everybody else was, of course, throwing out numbers, before he put his out there, $4,000, $6,000, that kind of stuff. So he's probably sitting there going, how the hell could I do $14,000?
Well,
And
it's funny. Well, when people ask those things on those Facebook groups, and people just put out numbers,
mm-hmm,
I tend to just break out hours.
mm-hmm,
I, cut material this much, cut and coat material 6 hours. So I'll give them an hour breakouts
mm-hmm,
versus a price, because your price, who knows what you're charging, and how much. Some guys are charging $65 an hour for shop rate. Some
mm-hmm,
people are charging $150. Dude, if you can get $150 an hour for shop rate, good for you.
yeah,
That's awesome. That is not normal. That's
mm-hmm,
that's not that. If you're charging $65 an hour, I don't know where you are, but you're probably a little bit low.
mm-hmm,
So just throwing numbers out there. Um, Actually, I had a guy ask me. I had two guys actually ask me last week about hey, I know you got a pricing structure, just ballpark, like, what are you thinking? And I didn't give them, no, I didn't give either of them numbers. I gave them hours.
mm-hmm,
I said, this is how much, I gave him numbers for powder coating, because that's just, I don't, I give ballparks for powder coating. But as far as fabrication stuff like that, like, you got to get into the weeds of, like, I think one was a mono stringer, and it had like it wasn't a, it was like a quarter turn landing on it to go up to
mm-hmm,
other ones. And it was just like, it was a weird, funky thing. And I was, I just gave them hours on it. How are you going to attach the treads, plus, X amount in treads, and plus, this for the, for the handrail. But, um, I forget where I was going with that. Yeah, it's instead of giving prices, I would just give them what I think the hour should cost, and they can figure it out themselves, because
yeah.
that's how you teach people, um, let them figure it out, like, help them along, but don't give them the answers.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that that monostringer staircase too, because I mean, another part of this whole equation too is having some understanding of what the market's going to bear.
Mm-hmm.
There's two different kinds. There's a couple different kinds of work out there. There's the guys that are mobile welders, and it's all just about the hourly rate. Like, if that's how you make your business, make your living by traveling from job to job and repairing broken excavator booms and farm equipment and that kind of stuff. That is all about, are you $100 an hour, or are you $150 an hour, and what's everybody else in the market? Because if
Mm-hmm.
everybody else is 150, just because you can be 100 doesn't mean you should be 100. Now,
Yes.
you might want to be a buck 40 so that you're under everybody else by a little bit, and they go, oh wow, let's go grab him because he's a little bit less expensive, but there's no reason to give away $40 an hour. But that's like a different a way of doing business because it's just so labor intensive. The material is so small. When you've got more of a well-rounded business, especially doing higher end stuff like like these monorails or mono stringers that are so popular now. Same thing. Like if you figured out a way to do these things efficiently, like maybe instead of welding up. I saw a video the other day of a guy who he was using a press brake and a CNC table to fabricate kind of like the piece that the tread sits on and breaking edges on it and breaking an angle on the bottom of it so he could just weld that whole pan to the stringer instead of what you normally see. You got the stringer and then you got that angled piece of tube and you got the 1/2-inch plate with all the holes drilled in it. I mean, at the end of the day, the thing probably is just as structurally sound because there's like 1/4-inch plate and it had the turn down edges, but he probably cranked these things out in like a fraction of the time that it took to cut all those tubes and weld everything and grind them and try to make them look nice because that's one of those things where they want everything ground and body fillered and everything else to make it look good. But I mean, especially for something like that, you're in a doctor's house or something, and the guy's expecting to pay, $40,000 for this staircase, and that's what they go for. Just because you figured out a way to do it for 25 doesn't mean you should be selling it for 25.
Yep.
So you gotta know what the market is worth, and what it's doing. So it kind of goes against what we've been talking about these people throwing numbers out on the internet and everything. But at the same time, if you can get relevant information, like you get on there and you say, hey, how much is handrail in in Lehigh Valley, and 3 people go, yeah, I'm right over in Allentown and it's X number of dollars for this kind of handrail. At least it gives you some clue as to what is going on. If some guy out in Phoenix is saying it's $110 a foot, it doesn't mean anything to you. But if you can get relative information, you can go, wait, I just had 3 guys tell me it's $140 to $150 a foot for this picket rail, and I'm at 120. I'm 135 now.
Yep. I'm not gonna lie. That's how I priced myself when I first started out. Everybody else in the area was like $95 an hour. Well, I take that back. I started low when I didn't quite when I was still doing side work. Man, I was doing mechanic work for 45. I started at $45 an hour, and then I realized I'm like, oh, this is way too low, and I bumped it up to $65 an hour. And then when I went on my own, I was like, well, everybody else is like 95 to like a 115 an hour. I'm like, I'll be 85. And then everybody else bumped their prices up, or maybe they didn't bump them up. Maybe I just got more information, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to charge a little bit more because now I know what the market will bear. I had no idea what my costs were. I was just charging what everybody else charged, and I was making money. It was okay,
Yeah. No, and like I say, if that works for you, that's great. But if you want to grow a business and get to the point of really understanding, I've got money to set aside. I've got I've got some for the lean times and for down the road and all. You got to know your numbers. Something came into my head and it just flew out the other side. Shit.
Yeah, to run it properly, you have to know your numbers so that you're able to not only just run your business, but budget for the future. Budget for a machine replacement, budget for like up here in the northeast, heat. Well, our heat bill is $800 a month to heat our radiant heat floor shop. Well, we don't have that cost in the summertime. No. So if you build in that $800 a month for the 4 months that we've got the heat on, it's and then you divide that out over 12 months, that's really not that much, but you can be putting that money away. We talked about one of the first thing was machine replacement. Well, everybody's, I feel like I know I certainly did. Half the people out there start a business because they love tools and they want to be able to go buy more tools. I'm not gonna lie, that's part of the reason why I did it too. So you want to upgrade in tools. Well, you can't have 30 grand in your bank and go spend 25 on a plasma table because you wanted it, because now you're basically back to zero. You gotta be able to budget and know that you've got income coming in, you've got the money there to cover yourself, one of the big things that I got myself into trouble with was I would take on, as I got more guys, I would take on bigger jobs.
Mhm.
And these jobs would be, a month or two long. And it's not even like full-time work. It's just like, all right, well, we'll be here for like, a week or so, and then we'll come back in a couple weeks and keep going. But I wasn't, like they weren't jobs where you could just bid, or I'm sorry, bill partially per month. And honestly, back then I didn't even know about that. I
Mhm.
didn't know that was a thing. I thought you got all the, however much you want it for a deposit up front, and then you got paid at the end. And I would be fronting all the money, for a long time. Like we didn't have any, credit cards or lines of credit. It was literally, we paid for everything that we had out of the money that was in the bank. So I'd buy $5,000 worth of material and not have much money left over. And I'm like, I still got to make payroll for the next 3 weeks
Mhm.
until I can even submit an invoice, and then wait 30 days. If they pay in 30 days, I'm 7, 8, 9 weeks out until I get my next pay. I get paid for this job.
Yeah.
So, I think that was one of the problems I had when I first started out, was I was overextending myself with time and not having enough, taking on with bigger jobs, it just takes longer. And when it was two of us or three of us, if a job took 2 weeks, it wasn't that bad. But if they took 45 days to pay, well, you got to front all their salaries for those 2 weeks for
Mhm.
6, 8 weeks until you get paid, you know?
Yep.
So that was one of the pitfalls I had when I first started out.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than putting $30,000 worth of work in place on July 1st, because you're not going to be able to bid it, bill it until July 30th.
Mm,
And like you said, if you're lucky, you're getting paid August 30th.
yep.
So it's, yeah, it's your minimum 2 months out. I mean, you get into some of the smaller general contractors that are still able to, hey, look, I can't wait. I understand what your billing process,
Hmm.
process with your owner is, but look, I can't provide that kind of stuff. Or if you're going to ask me to do that, my $30,000 bid just became $35,000 because of the time value of money.
Yep.
And when you start throwing that out there, some GCs will go, you know what? I can get you paid in a week, no problem. Because to them, $30,000 is nothing. I
Yep.
mean, it's nothing. I mean, one of the GCs I used to work at, years ago, they did about $5 million or $5 billion a year across the country. Okay, so they're think about that. That's roughly $500 million of billings a month across all their projects. And the way it was worded, the contracts were worded, it was when they got paid by the owner, whether that was 35 days, 45 days, whatever, the subcontractors were to be paid in 7 days. Okay. Well, sometimes they would just hold the money an extra week. You know
And
what
just
the
bank the
interest is
interest.
on a
Yeah.
week on $500 million? And they didn't do it every week on every job. They would play a game and go, this week we're going to hold all the money on this job, and next month we're going to hold it on that job. So it wasn't like an ongoing thing. They'd make millions of dollars a year
Hmm.
just in waiting to pay subcontractors. Meanwhile, like you say, you're sitting there going, dude, I got to make my mortgage. I got my payroll to make. I got, food, groceries to buy, but they're making millions of dollars just playing funny money. Yeah.
That's why they can charge your credit card in a matter of seconds. It's paid, but to get a refund, it's 5 to 7 days.
Exactly.
Don't don't
Exactly.
don't don't give me that baloney. I know what's
Mm-hmm.
going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is 2023. You
Yeah.
like you can make it happen. You just don't.
Yeah. So it came back to me what flew through my head before. Talking about trying to gauge your cost relative to what else is going on in the market. Um, if you're winning every single bid you put out,
Too cheap.
you need to raise your price.
Hmm.
Like when you submit a bid, that, even a homeowner, if you say, hey, it's $3,500 for these rails, and they say, can you start tomorrow? You're probably a little bit light. I used to joke that you really want them to go, really? How much? Because that's how you knew you had the right price. You get that little whistle, like, woo, man. Uh, so if you're winning every job, or you're winning, the standard they say for the bigger stuff that I do is you're typically getting 3 bids from
Hmm.
each trade to then put your estimate together and submit to the owner. So technically, you should be winning as a subcontractor 1 out of every 3, right? So, because the same thing, if I'm handing you every single job that you bid, you're probably coming in lower, than you
Yeah.
need to be at every single project. Now, again, it might be because you figured out something, some way to be more efficient, and you're happy with the money you're making. If that's the case, then great. But again, why leave money on the table? You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I find that sometimes it's because I mean, when you're doing government work, it's written in the law that you have to go with the lowest bidder.
Mm-hmm.
But on jobs where it's you know, they have the discretion to go do that. Like I a lot of people I talk to, they say, well, it's the most qualified bidder.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the cheapest, because you could be the cheapest and unqualified, and you're going to make the job go sideways. So a lot of times, if you're in good with a contractor, and like the one roofing company in North Jersey, we're their people, no matter what
Mm-hmm.
our price is. They all like, and they've told us that. They're like, we just go to you because we serve them really, really well. Doesn't matter if we're more expensive. Doesn't matter if we're cheaper. Like there's a value, especially with GCs. They would rather pay more money to have things go smoothly than because it's I mean, it's not even their money. They
Yeah.
like if you back it up to the fundamentals, we're all here to get a job done and get paid and go home to our families and make a little bit of money. Whatever you can do to make that owner or that GC or that whoever, their life easier, especially if it's not their money, they don't really care that much. They'll
Right.
go with you if you're a little bit more expensive, just because it's going to be so much less headache. They know you're going to get the job done right. They know you're going to be on time. They're going to be upfront and honest. And there's a value to that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you conduct business like that, not that you can write your own check, but you can sell yourself. Like we sell ourselves on customer service, and we're not the cheapest around. We're like, I flat out, we're just not.
Mm-hmm.
But we show up when we're going to show up, when we say we're going to show up. When things go wrong, we address it, we own it, and we make it right. Even when it costs us money, we don't make anything. And there's a value to that. So it's not only just the lowest bidder. It a lot of time, in depending on the market you're in, I should say that too. But a lot of times it's, if you like, that's why relationships are so important. If you get in with good contractors and you become their steel guy, you like, as long as you don't mess it up, you're set for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's the challenge is, it depends on the project. A lot of our projects, if it's a lump sum from us to the owner, like where they're not asking for, to see all the bids and show me the 4 bids you got on steel and why you went with so and so. You're right. I mean, we'll just, we'll go with the guy that we know, is going to do the job right and is going to get it done on time, and isn't going to give us a hard time on the back end. In other cases where they do ask for those, and like you said, it's best value as opposed to best price. Um, we've got to be able to prove, kind of state our case. We can't just go,
Mm-hmm.
well, Kevin's a really nice guy, we're going to spend an extra 15%, for him. It's got to be, look, I've worked with him, 4 times in the past. He's always got it done on time. Or, hey, his price is a little bit higher, but he's got the availability to be able to be there when we need him. The other guys are all saying it's going to take them 6 more weeks to be there. So from a schedule perspective, it makes more sense to have him here. Or he's got a special piece of equipment that's, going to be able to erect this, without disturbing the area next door, or tearing up the landscape, or give them some kind of a reason other than, hey, you've got the lowest price.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, you got to do something to kind of set yourself apart to be able to be, that, hey, we're paying a little bit more for this guy because of X, Y, and Z.
It's funny that you say that, because we got the job that almost fully paid for our spider crane was because we opted to use a spider crane for the
Mm-hmm.
job.
Yeah.
And it was at a golf course. And I don't know where we came in on price with that, because he didn't tell me. But he sold it to the owner as, look, everybody else is going to tear up your yard, which is your golf course, by bringing lulls in and then make all this work. This company is going to come in with a spider crane. They're going to put down ground protection mats. They're going to set up. They're going to set the balconies. They're going to pack it up, and they're going to move to the next one. And there is two balconies that like you couldn't do anything with. Like other than a spider crane, you couldn't get any other machine in there. The balconies were a little over 1,000 pounds a piece. You had to lift them out like 12 feet horizontally and about 14 feet vertically. And the only thing that you could get through the garden trellis that you had to go through, because it was the building was like a U shape with a garden trellis in there, was the spider crane. And because we had that, I mean, I don't know where we came in on price, but even if we were high, I'm sure that kind of sold the job to the fact that they didn't, because like they would have PGA Tour stuff there and whatnot. The fact that we weren't going to tear up their precious grass, boom, we're going to go with
Oh
them.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. If there's something, you gotta have some way of distinguishing yourself. And like you said, that's probably the best money you ever spent on that machine.
The best money they spent on my machine.
That works too. That works too.
So is there anything else that you want to cover, man?
I mean, I think we hit pretty much everything, that I had on my list here. I mean, what do you think? Did we miss anything?
No, I think we're good. The only other thing I would add is going back to what we talked about, well, what I talked about um extending yourself out too far on the bigger
Mhm.
jobs, is once I realized why my cash flow wasn't there, what I started doing was in my contract wording, um, I would put milestones.
Mhm.
And once I hit the milestone, I would put a percentage or a dollar amount that I would bid, or I'm sorry, that I would bill. So let's say, you have railing on the building and you've got railing on a retaining wall. Well, once the building's done, or once the retaining wall is done, I'm going to submit that bid, or that bill,
Mhm.
because I know that there's 7 other trades on the building, and I'm not going to be there to do the building railing for 2 months. So I would call that out in my wording. And actually recently, so it's funny, I feel like the longer I've been in business, the more wording I put in my estimates, because you just run into problems all the time
Mhm.
where, like our standards, we carry like $1 million insurance on auto, like 2 million liability and or general liability, and I think 1 million on our umbrella. And we put that in our estimate
Mhm.
because we have been caught actually recently, um before we, before like they gave us the bid package, they said bid on this. They didn't give us any specs about insurance or anything like that. We gave a number. Well, they require in their contract, they required $4 million
Mhm.
of insurance, and we don't carry that. And it was like $10,000 a year more to carry that $4 million. And that was prorated, but like it was going to be like, we told them it was like $4,900 or something like that to add this $4 million insurance that you didn't tell
Right.
us about until you gave us the contract. So putting things like that into your estimates, talking with Jeremiah from Mobile Weld, after I talked to him, I put, this price is pending that we don't hit any major
Yeah.
rebar,
Mhm.
because we've had problems where we've been on, I mean, like prevailing wage jobs. And they say, we're putting in removable railings with brackets, and all the brackets were however many inches down, but just so happens that all the bottom bolts hit a piece of rebar all the way across.
Mhm.
And we're trying to go in there crooked, and some of them are just not working out. He has to dig under. Like it was just an absolute mess. So putting things like pending, hitting rebar, because hitting rebar could spend you could spend hours on just a couple
Mhm.
holes to try to make that right. And if it's rebar that is under tension, for something, you can't just blast through that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually, it brings up a good point of discussion. Because I've done classes on writing your scope of work or writing your proposal. Like entire, the one for the National Association of Minority Contractors and for some other groups. Because one of the worst things that happens, especially, for us, because everybody thinks that, oh, I spent all this time, I got my proposal together, I had all this work to do to get this thing in, to get it to Bob for, there's a bid. Dude, there's like 5 steel contractors that are pricing this thing. There's also 30 other trades. And I've got to take all this stuff and get it together and figure out who's got the right numbers in 30 different trades and assemble them into a number to put into my, to my bid. Okay. And you get a proposal that says, all structural steel and miscellaneous metals work, $400,000. Like, really? I mean, can you give me a little bit more information? Like, I'm not asking you to give me a fully itemized list, but say, hey, I got so many tons of steel, I got so many square feet of deck, I've got 150 feet of railing, I've got, 4 dumpster gates, I've got 72 bollards. Give me a little bit of information so that, because I've done my own takeoff and I know what I think I should have. And 4 other people have done it, or 3 other people, or 2 other, however many steel bids we've got. And again, if your number's too high or too low, help me understand why. Because maybe it's like, wait a minute, I've got 82 bollards. You say you've got 82. These other guys only picked up 20 apiece. They must have not looked at the site plan, or they must have missed them in a elevation at every dock door, or a note somewhere that said, 4 bollards at every door. Help me make sure your bid's complete, number one. So Tell me what you've included. Okay, and again, don't give me 6 pages of it, but give me enough information to make me understand that, or let me understand that what you priced and you looked at the drawings and picked it up. More importantly than telling me what you've included is tell me what you don't have.
Excluded. Yeah.
Okay. And steel guys are the best at that, man. I mean, normally I actually get 2 lists of exclusions. Okay, like if I got a structural steel job, like $2 million worth of structural steel or something, I'll get a list of the inclusions, like I just mentioned. Then I'll get a section that says job specific exclusions. Like, I didn't pick up the glass railings. I don't have the edge condition detail that's on page S304 detail number 17. Stuff that's very specific to this job that he excluded for whatever reason. He thought somebody else was going to do it, drilling for blocking, whatever, so there'll be, half a page of inclusions, half a page of exclusions. And then when you flip to the next page, there's what they call standard exclusions. And it covers everything that ever happened in the course of that company being in business, man. Stuff like you're saying about, I don't have it covered if I start hitting rebar. I don't grout base plates. I don't have perimeter cable protection. I don't have this. I don't have galvanizing. I don't have AESS. And you're reading through this stuff and you're going, well, it says you don't have AESS. There's no AESS on the job. It's like, well, yeah, so that's okay, right? Because I don't have it. It doesn't. We're good.
Yep.
But it's like, and that list gets longer and longer and longer every year. Because, like you said, oh shit, I got caught on that, on that rebar in that thing. That's another one for me to add to my standard exclusions on every single job,
Yep.
So again, tell me what you have, tell me what you don't have, because the less time I have to spend trying to figure out if you've got the scope covered and you're going to give me everything I need for this job, the better off I am.
Yep.
Because if it comes in and that, I can't make heads or tails out of it, and I ain't got time, it's going in the garbage unless it's like a really good number and I got to really, find out if it's, going to help me or not.
Well, it's funny. So another thing that I am careful about is, like the smaller jobs where they're like, oh, well, yeah. I'm like, well, do you want this just primered? Are you going to have people come in and paint it? Well, include painting too. I'm like, no. I'm not going to include painting. I'm going to put painting on a separate line item.
Yeah.
Because, if you say include painting and the whole job is $25,000 and it's another $5,000 in painting and you only tell them it's $30,000, you're not comparing apples to apples with everybody else.
Yep.
Something that a lot of people don't like to pay for is media blasting. So like if you want a railing and, media blastings, like in-house, we charge $150 an hour, plus our material. Some places charge $250 an hour, but it works for us. And we give you a price to media blast it. And then we give you a price to top coat paint it. and here's a price of a second coat of top coat paint.
Hmm. Yeah.
Instead of it's that way you can pick and choose, like, hey, this is the right way to do it. This is bottom line number. But if you're pretty price conscious or you're comparing us to somebody else, well, you know, just take this one number and that's what you got, because that's what everybody else is giving you too. Because a lot of people say, oh well, just include that, include that. I'm like, no, I'm gonna put it in a separate line up. No, 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 just include it. I'm like, no, because they don't understand that we're gonna come in higher than everybody else
Yeah.
because and be specific about it. The more I find, the more specific I get with things, like engineered drawings. We exclude engineered stamp drawings. You want
Hmm.
engineer stamp, it's this much. And
Yep.
just make it as easy as, we use QuickBooks for our estimating and invoices. And in the bottom left hand corner, you can adjust like what is standard. And sometimes
Hmm.
I'll delete out like things that just straight up will never apply to that job. I'll just
Hmm.
delete it out, but at least it's there and I don't forget to put it in. It's always there, and I can delete it out if I
Yep.
need, or I can just leave it in and they look at it and they're like, all right, well, that just doesn't apply to me. And it's
Yeah.
already, it's automatically gone.
Yeah.
So
Have you seen the term delegated design show up in any of your jobs yet?
delegated design. No, I have not.
It's basically another way of saying, the architect and engineer are not assuming responsibility for something. We're starting to see it more and more places. But
Hmm.
with regard to steel, it's usually handrails, making sure that they meet the impact load, the sideways impact load and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Steel connections, stairs, um, stuff that, again, the architect can draw it really nice, but it's up to you to kind of make sure that's actually going to stand up and that the connections are going to work and everything's going to meet code. So you may start seeing that. And typically, if it's delegated design, somebody other than that structural engineer and architect are signing and sealing a set of drawings. So
Mm.
what's going to end up happening is if you exclude the engineered design, you have to give them that ad because they're going to want to plug it in to make sure they've got
Mm-hmm.
it covered. So it's just a
Yeah.
new term.
Pay attention to the drawings that they give you. Are they stamped or not?
Mm-hmm.
Are they for bidding purposes only, or are they for like complete ready to go? I'll even call out the last revision date in my
Yep.
estimate, because that way this price is for this drawing that you sent me with the last revision date of this. If you guys have something else different that you guys changed, well, that's okay. You can send it to me, but this price is good for this drawing,
Yeah.
not what you already revised on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. It's funny because the guys who started listening to this podcast at the beginning about how to establish a labor rate and stuff, their heads are about to explode with all the stuff they get to toward the end here. I gotta think about this, I gotta think about that. Oh my god, what revision date? But yeah, that happens a lot. I mean, like, especially you start getting the bigger jobs. Um, it's become easier for the architects to draw stuff numerous times because they do it all on the computer. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like when I was in college, I worked for a drafts, as a drafts person, and still drawing stuff by hand. And if you didn't have to draw something twice, you didn't draw it twice because it was actual time required to draw a blow up detail or a blow up of a blow up detail, that kind of thing. Nowadays, they just click a button and it creates it at a bigger scale again. So they can create pages and pages and pages of stuff. And when they go in and make a revision, it revises it in all of those locations. So it's far
Mm-hmm.
easier to issue an addendum and another set of drawings, like you said. Uh, and on our end too, as contractors, it's gotten easier because it used to be that all that stuff came out. We had to photocopy it and either FedEx it to you or fax it to you or whatever. Now I load it up on have you seen any like Building Connected or
Oh
Plan
yeah.
Hub or okay.
Oh yeah.
So now I dump it. I literally like drag it out of my inbox into that thing, into an addendum folder, and hit a button that says addendum 4 has been published. Have at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you've got to have that because we're going to assume that I sent it to you, you've got it. And if you haven't said, look, I've seen addendums 1, 3, and 4, or 1, 2, and 3, and we're up to number 6. That's another, like right on my little checklist of stuff where I'm evaluating bids. I've got the total number of addenda that have been sent out. I know we've got 1 through 6, and when Kevin's bid comes in, he's got 1 through 4. I know well, I can either say, well, I know 5 and 6 didn't really affect steel, so I'm not worried about it. Or I can go, wait a minute, half the structural drawings got revised in addendum 5. That's a problem,
Yeah.
So it's made it far too easy for people to send information out and hope that everybody, and just assume that everybody's getting it, because we're all so interconnected nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that would be another thing for for our listeners here, is to, as much as people say, I don't want to be tech savvy, I don't want to deal with all this internet stuff. Well, guess what? If you want to go after bigger and bigger work, you're going to kind of have to.
Yep.
And the good thing is, it used to be expensive, and it used to be complex, and there used to be 30 different platforms out there. It seems like they've kind of settled on like 2 or 3 maybe now, maybe
Mm-hmm.
4. And I don't think it costs you anything, does it?
No,
Yeah.
it's free. It's free to log in. It's free to have like your own portal, like sign up and everything. And a lot of times you don't even have to sign into that. Like they'll have it like a shareable link that you don't even have to sign up for anything. You can just
Right.
view it and download it. And yeah, there's a couple like that.
Yeah. Well, we pay for it. Believe me. I mean,
Oh, I
it's like,
bet.
it's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to do that. But at the same time, I remember back in the day, we get like a set of drawings in for a school or something. And the first thing you did was you sent them off to your Reaper Graphics company, and you got 100 sets of drawings printed. And they showed up at the office the next day, and 3 or 4 people spent a couple hours rolling those drawings up and stuffing them in the FedEx tubes to FedEx them out to everybody. And then everything went digital, and it was, all right, I need 100 CDs burnt. So now we were burning CDs and sticking them in FedEx envelopes instead of tubes, and FedExing them out. And now it's like just boop, gone,
Yep.
internet. So
It's funny. I've wondered how that went back in the day. Like even back in the 80s. Did people like physically drive to these places to get these plans? Like, did they just
yeah,
mail them off to like how did you solicit bids? Did you just
we
you have your list of people and you just send it out? Do you give them a call? Like, do you like you
there's a
know?
thing called the post office. We used to
Yeah.
send out invitations to bid in the mail. And like I said, for our good contractors and for our big trades, like I said, we would take a set of plans and mail them or FedEx them. And then we also had a plan room in the office. So like if your scope was just, say 150 feet of handrail, I'm not going to send you, a 300-page set of drawings.
Hmm.
I would either call you or fax you. We used to have this bid fax thing that would actually send out a fax, and you'd get in the morning, and there was a fax there that said invitation to bid, ABC school in whatever town, and plans are available in the plan room. And somebody would drive to the GC's office, and usually if there were 4 or 5 GC's, everybody had one, so you'd find the one that was closest to your office, your shop, and you'd go over there. And in that plan room, there would be a rack with every set of plans for every job that we were working on at that point. And you'd grab a set of plans, and you'd sit down there, and you'd just strip off your quantities right there in the plan room.
In the bedroom.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Or if we wanted to be nice, we would do the takeoff and say, hey, we've got 150 feet of railing,
Okay.
and need a price. But then the problem, that the reason we didn't like doing that was because if I took off 150 feet and it was actually 160 feet, you're standing there with your hand out for an extra 10 feet of railing at the end of the job. Whereas if you come in and you take off 150 feet and it's actually 160 feet, it's on you. So
Interesting.
it was. I almost take offense to the fact that you said way back in the 80s, because I graduated high school in the 80s. Okay, so I'll let it slide.
I say way back in the 80s because I was born in 86.
Oh, dude, I graduated high school in 87. Well, it's actually funny. I mean, I work with a lot of, we get a lot of kids that we, they call them kids, we hire right out of college now. And, you've got these 22 and 23-year-olds you're running around. It's like a different world. I mean, they don't want to pick up the phone and call anybody. They want to just text people.
I
They just want to
know.
email. It's like, and sometimes it's like, well, did you reach out to someone? Yeah, well, I sent them an email. When? 3 days ago. And you haven't followed up. I mean, did you send another email? You sent a text message? Here's a crazy idea. Pick up the phone, call them and go, hey, dude, what's going on? Did you get my email? No, I didn't get it. Okay, well, here's what I need,
You get so much more done, like accomplished in a phone call than you do on an email. and there's no misinterpretations. You hear the tone of voice that they're
Yeah.
in. Like, it's a lost art. It really
Yeah.
talking on
What
the phone is a
what my what
lost
my
art.
kids what my kids have told me, because I mean there's just been times when I've said, did you hear from so and so? Oh, I texted her, I haven't heard back. I'm like, why don't you call? What they say is that when you send a text, the receiving person has the ability to decide when they want to respond.
Mhm.
They're not as inconvenienced as when they pick up the phone and they have to respond right away because you're on the phone waiting for them to pick up. I'm like, okay, I'll buy that.
Yeah,
Yeah, crazy.
right.
Yeah,
Well, hey man, I appreciate you spending the time, and really this is going to be so valuable for so many people who just don't quite, well, you don't know what you don't know. I feel like this is one of this and insurance are the two biggest questions that I get asked.
mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate your time for letting me pick your brain, and just giving me some insight on just how it's run on the big jobs, and just to lay it out and clarify it, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I said, if anything else comes up, give me a yell, shoot me an email, text message, Instagram, whatever. And
Cool, man.
any listeners, when you run the podcast, put the email address out there, contact info, whatever, and I'm more than happy to help wherever I can.
Cool. I appreciate it, Bob.
All
Um,
right,
how do you pronounce your last name?
Kovacs,
Kovacs, kind of like the fire truck company.
Kovacs, Kovacs
Kovac,
with an S,
Kovac,
Kovacs,
Kovac, Kovacs.
Kovacs, no H. It was Kovac when they came over from Hungary. They changed the H to an S, so Kovacs.
Kovacs.
You could almost think of it as Kovax, and then you'll have it right.
I'm gonna write that down so I don't forget. It's funny. You'd be surprised how many people who I talk to on here, and I'm editing the podcast, and it's like a Sunday night, and I had to send them because I know everybody from Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and I say, hey man, how do you pronounce your last name? Because we had a 4-hour conversation, and I don't know I can't pronounce
Yeah,
your last name, and I don't want to butcher it on the intros. So
there you go.
well, Bob Kovacs, I appreciate you, ma'am. If there's anything else I can do for you, let me know. But
Sounds good.
yeah, thank you very much.
You got it, man.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks. Sounds good.
See ya.